Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Winter Court Podcast, your premier podcast for competitive content for the Legend of the Five Rings LCG. I am Travis, and I'm joined here again by Dan and Gentry. And man, this is an exciting episode, actually. It was an exciting episode before, but just now, literally minutes before recording, Fantasy Flight Games announced that the entire Imperial cycle will be coming out within 6 weeks of the start. This is unprecedented for LCGs, and I'm super excited to get all these new cards very quickly. And they also revealed some Keeper and Secret Initiate cards we're going to talk about on top of the scheduled Phoenix deck tech today. So guys, welcome back to the show, and I hope you're as excited as I am.
Dude, we are freaking out right now.
I mean, we literally took an extra half hour to prepare for this just because it happened right as we were going to start anyway. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh, unbelievable. So I think since this is going to extend our episode a lot, we're going to jump right in. So what are your guys' initial thoughts on the 6-pack 6 weeks announcement?
It's so many cards.
It's a lot of cards really quickly. I think in a previous podcast we mentioned that what we would kind of like the release. We wish the release cycle would have been like, and I think one of us, either I mentioned or Travis, you mentioned that if they just released an entire cycle and then waited every 3 to 4 months to do the next release, that would probably be best from a competitive standpoint, because then you have this whole pool of cards to work with and kind of develop a more solid meta, but also just a lot more cards to play with, and it's more fun. Whereas compared to the old slower drip things, you had kind of a weird meta where certain decks would just be super dominant and then would fall out within after a few months because a certain card was then released. The specific example I'm thinking of is Controlling the Message and Hard Hitting News in Android Netrunner, and then Aaron Marin came out. Aaron Marin, which was subsequently banned in the most recent Netrunner update. But the fact that they're releasing all 6 packs in 6 weeks is insane. It's just, we're going to get all of the cards super fast and have a lot of things to play with and a lot of things to test, and it'll feel really fresh for a bit. And then then it'll give us some time to figure some things out, and then hopefully things will settle out. And then by the time everyone's kind of comfortable with where it's at, they're going to release the next. I think the big box is typically what they do, but we haven't seen an announcement for that, so we're not sure. But yeah, this is just super exciting. It's really cool that FFG decided to do that with L5R. It does seem like this is a specific special promotion that they're doing just to kind of pump the card pool a little bit and pump the game, which is really cool, because I think it just shows we actually have a diverse card pool that you can build and dig with. I know there have been some complaints about cost, but that's just the nature of some of these card games, unfortunately. So
yeah, I was to say that was basically my only complaint when I saw this at first, is the game just came out and they're gonna add another $90 onto the entrance fee, which is it's gonna make it really hard to sell to new players. It's gonna make it harder, I guess, to sell to new players, because it's gonna be an over $200 entrance fee just to play the game at a competitive level. But we were talking about if you just play casually, you could proxy. It's not too big a deal. Or if you just buy core sets and play with core sets as a casual play, it's not actually too bad. But other than that, I'm actually really happy with everything that's going to happen with this, because I think the game needed to be fleshed out a little bit. We obviously have a pretty good game already. It's actually reasonably diverse, but I think they needed just that little bit of push to make separate deck techs, and make it so that every deck has a few different ways to be played, and that you can expand on it in certain ways, and that every player can kind of play differently if they want to, and this will definitely get us to where we need to be, and it'll make the game really fresh for a long time. It's already getting to the point where I think a lot of people have at least vaguely figured out how a lot of decks play. We're starting to get to the point where there's almost an established meta, but this will shake it up a huge amount just after Worlds. So
during Worlds, technically.
I mean, yeah, technically during Worlds, but I don't think this will be actually illegal to play in Worlds.
I think
I wouldn't think so anyway.
It's not going.
One of the primary complaints was kind of Dynasty decks kind of feel samey from clan to clan. So a Lion deck is going to be a Lion deck, or a Scorpion deck is going to be a Scorpion deck. There are a handful of minor changes you can make, but for the most part, because you're so limited in what your Dynasty picks are, adding in just more options into that pool is just going to make it so that way you can actually do some stuff. And then obviously with the conflict cards that we've seen, I think that just opens up a whole another range of possibilities of what you can actually do with the conflict deck. Because right now they seem a little bit more tuned to just province breaking and having options to play the different play styles. So the honor, dishonor, as well as some other things playing off different roles is going to be really exciting. So
yeah, I for one kind of hope that they continue with this style of release of cycles so that it comes in one big block and then you get more downtime to explore that meta rather than it being a slow drip. I think that's overall healthier for the game and builds excitement of it more regularly rather than like one pack adding one new card to one deck.
Right.
Honestly, the only problem I have with this is for 6 weeks when the cards come out, I'm going to be like disincentivized to play the game as much because I'm going to get 2 cards. I'm going to get like 1 card from my deck and I'm going to put it in my deck. And then the next week, I'm going to get another card and I'm going to be like, well, now I have to change my deck again.
I don't know.
And I'm going to have to do that for 6 weeks. Like every single deck I have, I'm going to
What
be
a
like,
terrible
every week for 6 weeks, I'm going to have to change my deck. And I could be like, man, I don't know. Like I'm playtesting with just this card instead of all of the cards right now. I don't know. That's the only problem. That's like one of the things I'm looking at too. I'm still gonna play, obviously, but like I'm gonna be I'm gonna play probably less as the packs come out because I'm gonna not want to play with like a slightly incomplete deck. You know,
I don't think it'll feel incomplete. I feel like it'll feel like it's constantly getting better rather than feeling complete. I don't think there's, at least from what we've seen so far, I'm not sure if they're going to add new themes to clans in this first cycle. Outside of like the general Imperial theme.
I don't know if they'll add new themes necessarily, but like it seems like they might, at least to some degree, like there will be playstyles that open up that weren't possible before, I think. Once the new cycle comes out, and it's going to be, you're not going to be able to play the deck to its actual extent, like to a competitive extent, until you actually have the entire card pool for it.
I feel like that's only true for like the Imperial theme. That's like the only one that I think that is like an actual new theme. For the most part, I think like most of the cards they've revealed have just been like, just kind of like helping and or like generally going with what the clan already does. Oh, and I guess ninjas for Scorpion. That might be a theme that doesn't actually develop until the full cycle.
Yeah, there's a couple of
any
different
trait-based theme like that generally takes like the full cycle, but Imperial and Shinobi I think are the only two. It seems like Lion are just getting more good stuff. Phoenix are getting I don't know, more control-y, looks like more control.
I really hope so. I really hope so because I'd like to keep playing Phoenix.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of clans are just kind of going like core set but more kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of some like so I think one of the best examples, if we want to kind of get directly into cards, which are super exciting. Actually, can I first note that almost all of the art on the Keeper Seeker cards that they've showed off is great.
It's always beautiful.
It's always the art in this game.
I'm
is
just like
amazing.
Constantly blown away by the art in this game. Crisis Breaker, pretty fantastic. But like just an example would be like Dragon has their Seeker card is the Stone of Sorrows. And so we'll get into that a little bit more, I guess, when we go directly through some of these. But it fleshes out the Dragon Investment Bank theme a little bit more. So, like, one of the downsides to that was sort of like you're giving fate to potentially your opponent. And now that's going to be able to enable investing a little bit more and feeling like you're going to get you hamstringing yourself. Obviously, also the synergies with like Seeker of Enlightenment. Like you want more fate on those rings to make those really strong characters. So
you were breaking up quite a bit there, Dan.
Yeah, everybody's a robot.
Oh, everybody's a robot now?
Everybody's a robot.
Discord. Gentry, you're not a robot to me.
I know. I'm not a robot to anybody. It's just you guys that are robots.
Oh, no. Well,
Dan's fixed.
The audition audio is going to be fine.
Yeah, it'll be all right.
Audio will be fine.
Anyway, my audio. There's just a couple seconds of Dan being a robot for me, so that's all right. It's all good.
Yeah.
So let's jump right into these Keeper and Seeker cards. I think it's a good thing to segue into. This is a big announcement. So a lot of competitive players, myself included, really was hoping FFG would release these cards before Worlds, so that the people picking the role would know kind of like where their clan was going, and generally get an idea of like what role they want to pick. And so now I think it's very clear for some clans what role they should probably go with. But let's just start with Crab.
We'll just go in alphabetical order.
Yeah, we'll just go Crab. I'm gonna kick us off. So Crab get a attachment here, Pathfinder's Blade. It is Seeker role only, and it is a weapon. It is 0 cost, gives you +1 military and +0 political, as a blade would typically do. And it has interrupt when the effects of the triggered ability on the attacked province would initiate. If attached character is attacking, sacrifice this attachment, cancel those effects. So you put this on a character who's going into a really nasty province like a Shameful Display, a Kore Mori, Endless Play, and so many things, and it just cancels it for 0. I think this is a fantastic attachment, and if you're a Seeker, Crab just got that much better. He already got Reprieve, and Pathfinder's Blade looks to be another great attachment to splash Crab for.
Works with the whole sacrifice mechanic too. So something like Crab are sacrificing things. So it's a 0 cost attachment, so it's not like it's costing you fate, just value.
Yeah, that's actually the best part. Is like even like a 0 cost one military attachment, like it actually does things outside of doing that too. So you can just kind of throw this on whatever, even if you're just running it blind provinces, and just make sure that you don't run into anything scary, and it'll never hurt.
Yeah, it's worth noting that these are like super face value evaluations, by the way. We have not yet played with these cards, literally just learned about most of them, so this will be
about 30
fun.
minutes ago.
Yeah, literally an hour ago.
So yeah, this will be fun. So anyway, that's Pathfinder's Blade. Tell us about the other Crab card. Whoever wants to go next. We'll pick an order.
I like the art on this one. So so this is the Keeper Roll card for a Crab, Crisis Breaker. It's a 3 fate character with 3 military, 1 political, the Bushi and Berserker traits, 1 glory. Keeper Roll only. Action. During a military conflict, if your opponent counts more than your current military skill, or more current military skill than you, choose a Berserker character you control. Ready that character and move it to the conflict. So it's important to note that he can target himself with this ability, so you can use him twice in a turn, which is what makes it cool. And then obviously, Crab have a couple other Berserker cards that this could potentially work on, but I think you just get a good statted dude. Interesting little trigger, so that way you can kind of and you can use this card aggressively, so you don't have to worry about, because he can come in on defense if they're attacking into you militarily. Also, this has this really awesome art of this Crab beating an Oni over the head with a Jade Tetsubo, and it like breaks, and so like the Jade Tetsubo's flying off the panel. Oh my gosh.
This art's phenomenal. Card's also really good. I think he's really good if you can attack first with him and then just bring him in on the defense and then buff him up with your stronghold. Seems pretty sweet to me. That's a good reason for Crab
just
to
a 3 cost 6 military pretty much every turn, yeah.
Yeah, good reason for Crab to stay Keeper. So Gentry, pick your Poison of the Crane cards. Which one do you want to cover?
I guess we'll just go in order. I'm going to do the Seeker card for Crane Clan. It is a 1 cost event. It is Test of Skill. Seeker roll only, like I said. Action, name a card type. Reveal the top 3 cards of your conflict deck. Top 4 cards if you control a duelist. Add up to 2 revealed cards of that type to your hand and discard the rest for 2 influence. First of all, I only just realized looking at this card now that he's cutting a Tatami mat. But secondarily, this card is real cool. Like the likelihood of you getting at least 1 card off of this is basically, it's almost impossible to not get at least 1 card. The idea is that you're drawing at least 2 and discarding the rest. So it's pretty easy to get a decent amount of value out of this, I think, especially if you're playing Crane and playing like a dual deck, which might be a thing. We're looking at, I can't remember what it was. There was another, it looks like they might be trying to go for a duelist theme with some of these. So it might be interesting to throw this into that deck. I think you get some good value out of it. It is 1 fate, so it's arguably maybe not going to be as good. We'll have to see, but I think it's worth playing.
I think if Spyglass has shown us anything, paying fate for cards is pretty all right. So I think this card's actually really good on the surface, just because Crane decks right now are like mostly events. I think they run very, very few attachments outside of like Madness, Katana, and Fan. So like you basically pay 1 and then you get to search the top 4 and you get to grab any 2 events from that. That sounds unbelievably solid. Especially like when you need a specific one, like a Voice of Honor going into the last conflict, or maybe you need a Way of the Crane. There's a lot of good things for this. So I think this is very much going to push Crane into the Seeker category. That said, their Keeper card is also quite good.
It's also important to note that, like, with the role cards that are conflict cards, the other clans can splash them.
Yeah.
And if they meet the requisite role requirements. So, like, the next one we're going to see, you going to get this one, Travis?
Yeah, so real quick, though, I'm not... This card is pretty solid to splash, but I think searching top 4 is what's going to make it really good. So Crane are going to have a couple duelists, I imagine, coming out. I mean, right now I think it's just Kazan. So hopefully a couple more duelists come out and give it a bit more of an edge. If you're searching the top 4, this card is really good. Top 3, I think it's a little less good, but probably still worth playing.
I think duelist training also gives you the duelist. So
what?
It's just how much I know.
Here.
Oh, that's weird. You get trained to duel, but you're not a duelist.
The other Crane card for Keeper is Disdainful Remark, which is 1 cost event and action during a conflict. If you control a participating courtier character until the end of the conflict, the attack province gets plus X strength, where X is equal to the number of cards in your opponent's hand. Considering the meta is very much bid 5, at least turn 1 right now, I think this card's quite powerful. Easily adding 5 or 6 strength to a province for 1, if it's a very important province that doesn't break, or a very high tempo one like Shameful Display. Yeah, that's worth it.
Yeah, and like I said, this is you said 1 influence on this guy too, so this is splashable if you want to get Crane in and you have a few courtiers for this to fire. So, just options.
Yeah, it's a nice defensive card. I think it puts Crane more in the control territory, where Test of Skill very much fits into the tempo territory they seem to be settling in right now. At least in my own experience.
Yeah, that seems to be the case. And this Disdainful is just so good in so many decks, though. I feel like Crane is going to get splashed a lot more just for this card. For anything that's a keeper role, just because there's going to be a lot of times where your opponent has, I mean, even right now, there's a lot of times where my opponent has 8+ cards, and when you're telling your opponent that you're running into a 12 strength province, pretty much no matter where they go, you're probably all right. It's probably not going to break.
Hey, even Tempo Crane might run this. Like, I think we've said before that Tempo Crane likes this just because they can go all in, and then you might not be able to counter break them.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they can just kind of run all of their stuff into any events or any thing that they want, as long as they have 1 courtier up to send into the combat. You're fine.
Not dragon. Lion maybe, because they have a handful of courtiers that could run. They're already Keeper. They kind of like Keeper.
Yeah, I think Phoenix really likes this card too.
Scorpion has a few courtiers if they want to splash.
Yeah, Scorpion has enough courtiers if they want to splash this. Plus, then they get Voice of Honor, but they can't really use it. But it's still a thing, I guess. Scorpion Dishonor, I think, really likes Disdain Remark. Yeah.
All right, sweet. Let's go to Dragon.
Oh yes, this is the card I was talking about earlier. This is the one I was talking about.
What is
all right? So this is the Seeker role card for Dragon. This is the Stone of Sorrows. It's a 2-cost attachment. Gives +1 military, +1 political skill as an item. Seeker role only. While attached character is ready, opponents cannot remove or gain fate from rings. So obviously, like I said before, this kind of fits into the whole Dragon investment bank kind of thing, and just is really good when you want to be. So that encourage you to play cards that spend fate to rings and not feel like you're cheating yourself. And buff Seekers of Enlightenment, make sure that they can stay powerful turn over turn. I think this is actually a very strong card for them. Two fate attachment obviously is a little bit on the expensive side, I guess. But I mean, for the value you can potentially get out of this card, I think is very strong.
Yep.
It actually didn't occur to me until you said Seeker of Enlightenment that you can literally get infinite value from Seeker of Enlightenment with this.
Yeah.
Yes.
You can actually force your opponent to just always have fate on rings, so that they always give your Seeker of Enlightenment a fate every time they make a conflict. If you really have to, if you really want to.
Keep in mind this only works while the attached character is ready, so you have to be holding a character back the entire time.
Yeah.
But it's still sweet. I like this.
True.
I like this as you attack, and then you put a bunch of fate on rings with your monks that require attacking, and then you just play the Stone of Sorrows, and then you're like, that was fine. And then you can go back and get it later.
the Enlightened Warrior.
The Enlightened Warrior. This does not work with Enlightened Warrior, obviously, but I think this is a solid alternative to it.
It works with the Enlightened Warrior in that after an opponent selects a ring with fate on it, place a fate on this character. So if you
you're right, it does.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about.
Yeah. You said Seeker of Enlightenment. That's the one.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
you're right.
I realized what you were saying after the fact.
Yeah.
You can contrive a situation where every single ring has fate, and you can have somebody back with the Stone of Sorrows. Then he could just stay out there.
Oh, that's
exactly.
tight. Yeah, that's
especially
cool.
if you go second, you can just like let them go through their whole conflict phase. It's like they have to take a ring with fate on it. They're not going to get the fate anyway, and then you have the last conflict of the turn. So you can hold all of your guys back and just not care until the last conflict where they can't stop you anyway. Where like it doesn't matter if that character gets bowed anyway.
Oh, like you put that like on E10 master. You could put that on an E10 master.
I think there's quite a few good Seeker cards so far. It looks like so maybe Seeker might be picked more than it was at Gen Con. We'll have to see. Gentry, tell us about the other dragon card.
Yeah, the other dragon card, their keeper card, is Northern Wall Sensei. It is the other dynasty character out of these. There's only 2 of them, one of them being Crisis Breaker for Crab. It is a 3-cost character with 2 stats, 1 glory. It is a Bushi. With the action, while this character is participating in the conflict, choose a participating character you control with 1 or more attachment. Until the end of the conflict, that character is immune to events. It sounds kind of interesting with Dragon having the whole like Voltron type thing. You can protect your Voltron. You can make sure that they don't do, that nothing bad happens to them, that they always stay in the conflict, and they can always do whatever they want. I don't know if the card is good. I think 3 fate seems like a lot for a 2/2 that has this effect that's literally there just to protect one other character, but it might see play if Dragon goes more along the route of just buffing one guy a whole bunch and just letting that guy run at everything.
I actually think one of the downsides of this character is it doesn't work like Shiba Yojimbo.
Yeah, this is true.
You have to use it preemptively, right? So whereas like Shiba Yojimbo is a reaction, correct? So
yeah, and they both have to be participating. It's really unfortunate too, because if you're attacking with the characters, your opponent obviously gets at least 1 action before you can use this effect, no matter what.
Yeah, Shiba Yojimbo is an interrupt. So like if this was an interrupt effect that was on similar, I think it'd be better, or it'd be fine. But like having to use it as a preemptive action kind of pulls it back. We'll see though. These are all like quick hit analysis.
It's also a preemptive action you have to do during a conflict, right? So it's a little action efficient unless you're defending. That said, he can target himself, so if you Tron him up, he can basically just protect himself. So that's nice.
True.
But I do think I like the other card for Dragon a lot more.
I do too.
Lion, I'm gonna pick. Personally, as a Phoenix player, this card gets me all warm inside.
Oh, yeah.
Guard Duty is a 1-cost attachment. It's keeper roll only for Lion. It's 1 influence. It gives +0/+0, and it has action. If attached character is defending, honor it.
Which is
splashable. Honoring is exactly what Phoenix needed. So it's while defending too. So like Phoenix already kind of just sit there and defend until they can win on board. So this is a fantastic Phoenix card. I guess Lion like it too, but I view this as a Phoenix card
because Phoenix just have
we're not biased at all.
Yeah, because Phoenix can take advantage of a higher glory a little bit more. They obviously like it a little bit better. I mean, same reason like you like the kimono that gives pride, right? So if anything that you can increase the ability, give you more opportunities to honor characters is great. I think Lion likes it okay. It's a cheap attachment that could potentially be a +2 buffs.
I mean, if you put it on AG, it's 3, or Taturi, it's 3. That's not insignificant.
No,
not at all.
And then all of a sudden, yeah. So it's it's a cheap splash too. So it's only 1 influence, 1 fate. Any of these cheap attachments that give like really solid effects like that, just a straight honor effect is insane. So
yeah, I mean it's 1 fate, essentially honor a character, but you can also repeat honor them if they stick around multiple turns and your opponent is on it.
That's the biggest thing is it's like it's one of the best cards to counter dishonor because you literally re-honor it once a turn with just this card.
Oh, yep. Crane really likes this too, like Savvy Politician defending.
Oh my gosh, I actually didn't even think about that. You throw this on a Savvy Politician, you get to honor 2 characters a turn.
What's also crazy about this
God. That's only if the Savvy Politician comes dishonored, though. I think, because she has to actually have a change
That's
of
true.
state.
She has to not be honored.
Right.
But
What's also crazy is, so say you have no honored characters on board, and you did this, and they attack you, right? And then you honor a character. Now all of a sudden your voice of honor is online, and that's something they have to worry about now that they didn't have to worry about previously. If you're playing, like, if you're Lion Splashing Crane, or if you're Crane at all, it's just
This is a juicy card. That's just it. This is a juicy card. One influence. It's gonna be it's gonna be a good reason to splash Lion in a splash.
I have the less
Dragon
juicy
world.
Lion card. It's okay though.
Tell us about it.
So this is the Seeker card. This is Time for War. It's a 0-cost event. Seeker roll only. Reaction: After you lose a political conflict, choose a Bushi character you control. Put a weapon attachment with printed cost 3 or lower into play from your hand or conflict discard pile attached to that character, and it's 1 influence. So we haven't seen some of the more expensive weapons yet. Obviously, seeing this card makes me anticipate there's going to be some expensive weapons that you're going to want to attach that are pretty good. Obviously, and it kind of goes with the whole, when Lion loses a conflict, they're going to hit you back harder, especially fitting their political stuff kind of with Akuma IEG. So, I think this card, it's hard to see how good this card is right now, simply because it's dependent on other cards. But you could get really good value out of this, obviously, because if you can play like a 2 or 3 cost attachment for ostensibly free already onto a character, and it's action advantage too, right? Because you don't have to spend an action to do it. So
I do think you have a lot of control over this card too. You can choose when you lose a political conflict, so I think it's just waiting for good weapons. Right now, like, the most valuable one is a Tetsubo, which is okay, and it does counter attachment hate quite nicely as well.
Yep.
So like, and you could get like an ancestral weapon back from your discard pile and put it on your character, and then when the character leaves play, it returns to your hand. Oh, that's neat.
That's also true. Yeah.
You just dig up your
Little
ancestors'
extra
weapon. Yeah, you can get more value. I think it's a neat card, and I think it will get. I think it'll be a neat card. But I mean, compared to Guard Duty,
yeah, I mean, this is not Guard Duty. Okay. This is basically it.
I actually wouldn't be surprised if this is actually better than Guard Duty, but Guard Duty is just so cool that
we should we need to reevaluate.
We should just because free stuff is hard. Free stuff from the discard pile is hard to just like turn down.
Yeah.
So I think it's not a bad card.
This is not a biased cast at all. There's definitely not 2 Phoenix players here who think of everything in terms of Phoenix. So there's a good reason that we like Guard Duty a lot.
Well, it's a Lion card too, and so like if I'm like a Lion Scorpion,
it's also player. 1 influence. So anyone who's a Seeker could take this and then just get weapons back. Dragon love this. Oh my god.
Oh. Yeah, and like I said, if we see some insane weapons, I just realized you can do something really absurd with this.
There's definitely gonna be.
So say you're Crane, or you're like splashing, you're Seeker and you're Crane or splashing Crane, and you play Test of Skill. You could name something else to like specifically like discard your weapon attachments.
Oh my gosh.
Dan, it's so jank. Okay, but Lion don't have many good weapons. They've got the Honored Blade.
Synergy.
That's it, actually. They just got Honored Blade.
But
but if Lion gets like a 2-cost weapon, oh man. I can see it. Alright, moving on to Phoenix.
So I'm gonna leave you with a good Phoenix card. I'm gonna take the one that makes me sad. I'm gonna do the Seeker card, which is a 5-cost event. Why? Consumed by 5 fires. It is a spell. It is fire. Imagine that. Action: If you control a Shugenja character, remove up to 5 fate from among characters an opponent controls. That's really bad. You have to control a Shugenja. That shouldn't be hard because you're Phoenix. If you're playing this in Phoenix, of course. 2 influence. I should say that. If you're playing this in Phoenix, you should have a Shugenja. You're probably going to. My problem is it costs 5, so I have to have 5 fate to play this. And secondarily, how often does my opponent actually have 5 fate for me to take? It's a completely even trade that's going to happen. Like, that's going to be viable to play 1 time per game, maybe. Even then, it's not going to be that good.
That said, in defense of this card, you could basically read it as a 5-cost board wipe. It does pretty much guarantee that
of
your
a
opponent
5-cost board wipe, but your opponent still gets to play for the entire turn. Where you
Oh.
basically don't get to, where you basically don't get to play characters.
I mean, you just. I think you save this till the end of the conflict phase, and then just like surprise, your board is gone. But,
dude, if I have 5 fate, if I am saving 5 fate until the end of the conflict phase, I think this becomes really obvious. Though.
I mean, yes and no, because like I don't know, I've had some recent games where it's actually not terribly hard to stockpile fate if you pass early in Dynasty and save it for tricks in the conflict phase, and then if you don't need those tricks, then
they just kind of roll over. Yeah, I've seen that happen with.
It could happen.
Too,
I don't think it's. I think your points are valid. I don't think this card is as playable as it looks. It is a fun card. It's a Timmy card, right? It's just full out like fire everywhere, burn everything.
I know we didn't. I know we said we didn't want to talk about them, but can we talk about Kakita Yoshi? Because Kakita Yoshi makes this card actually kind of playable. Kakita Yoshi is another Crane card that was spoiled in the same article, but it's just a Crane Dynasty character. And it doesn't matter. The rest of his effect doesn't matter. Whatever. I don't care. The only thing I care about is the action, which is while this character is participating in a conflict, discard the Imperial Favor, draw 3 cards, reduce the cost of each event you play by 2 in this conflict.
This for 3 would be sick.
At that point, if I could play this card for 3, it actually is kind of worth it because it still might not get 5 fate worth of value, but if I'm getting 4 or more fate worth of value for 3 fate, I'm really happy about that. And at that point, like I actually get fate value out of it, and it might be worth having done that. And it might actually be better for Crane in that respect, because Crane right now at least is playing really heavy tempo. And I see the only benefit to this card being raw tempo.
No, this card is straight control to me. It is I'm grinding you out long game. Like
I don't know though, because like you can play if you can play this for 3, you're actually just out fading your opponent.
This doesn't.
You're running into next turn where they have no theoretically where they have no characters.
Right, and that's good for control. Like Tempo wants to like build like a really strong board state and deny you yours, right? And like win a lot of rings and break provinces and put you on a clock. This will wipe their board and reset their tempo. So I think that this is anti-tempo. But still, even splashing it in Crane, you still need a Shugenja on board. So that's a little janky at best. So this card is fun, but janky. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it.
Can we talk about the good things about this card?
Are there good things about this card to talk about?
Yeah, so it has the art of an Oni getting burnt up, and the art is pretty dope. And then it's got a quote by Asawa Masahiro that makes him like the most wooden character of all time. By these fires be cleansed. He literally just throws fireballs. That's all this guy does. Anyway,
he is Ragnaros the Firelord. By fires be purged.
By fires be purged. All right.
All right, I'm gonna go on. Yeah, this is actually a really solid card. I think Harmonize is a 1-cost Phoenix event. It is keeper roll only. It has action during a conflict in which you are the defending player. Choose a defending character and an attacking character with equal or lower printed cost. Move each of the chosen characters home. This is super sweet, I think. So you can do a lot of cool things with this. I think the first one that came to my mind is you could defend with a Radiant Orator, and then move someone home with her ability, and then move her and someone else home, so your Orator can effectively fend off a 2-person attack for 1 fate. And that's not bad.
No, that's
pretty good for slowing the game down, and that's exactly what Phoenix want to do, is slow the game down. We'll talk about that.
The only problem with doing that with Orator is that you have to have more glory than them, and the likelihood of your Orator by itself having more glory than 2 other characters is pretty low.
It's also 1 influence.
It is 1 influence.
Send home effects in this game are just really strong because they're hard to counter. I mean, like the only thing you have right now is favorable grounds and then any kind of unicorn effects.
Yeah, basically.
So if you can, the fact that you can like defend with somebody and maybe get some type of trigger and then send them both home and like cancel one of your opponent's potential attacks is just really strong.
Yeah, I agree.
And follow up with your own attack because you didn't actually expend a character. So.
Oh yeah, that's true as well. But then again, you also moved home one of their defending or one of their attacking characters. But like if it's an LPB, yeah, I'll do that.
Strangely enough, I'm going to say this again. This is another card that seems better going second too, because you're sending a bunch of people home. You can actually just like keep them for a second attack or for your second attack.
If they're attacking first and like you use this and basically cancel out their first conflict, that seems totally fine.
Yeah,
because tempo.
Yeah, this is really good if you are going. I think it's actually really good if you're also defending the last conflict of a turn, because then you could just deny probably one of the more important or sneaky conflicts. So that's sweet.
Just deny a conflict. It's just good.
Yeah, it's just a good card.
Send home. The more I've been playing, the more like the send home effects just seem like total blowouts. Because like your opponent just can't do anything.
Yeah. I mean, yes and no. Again, you have to be really careful with the send home effects. They're powerful when used properly. Let me put it that way. You can't just like beat people with send home, generally speaking, because
it's not like
it does have a
removal,
downside.
but it's like
I mean, if you use it in the conflict where it matters that you win, it's very powerful. So let's move on to Scorpion. Dan, which of these beautiful cards would you like to talk about?
So, Gentry, I'll give you the backhanded compliment. So,
oh, sick.
I don't know if that's meant to be insulting or actually nice.
That was like nice, like double entendre there or something like that.
Yeah, it sounded nice when you said it.
Wow. This is the Seeker card. This is Oni Mask. It's a 0-cost attachment that gives 1 military, 0 political skill, item Mask, Seeker role only, attached to a character you control. Action: during a conflict, remove 1 fate from attached character. Choose a participating character. Treat that character as if its printed text box were blank, except for traits, until the end of the conflict. So this is sort of like a Cloud the Mind you can use at any time by spending fate off of your guy. I think it's a 0-cost attachment that just gives one mill buff, which is, I think, viable, and then it just has a secondary ability that could be very powerful. So also it's got the art of this kid, like this little kid, I think he was actually blind in one eye from the looks of it. He's like blind in one eye and he's like pulling this Oni mask off. And I just talk about art on cards. I don't actually care what the cards do.
Also, okay, we need to talk about art in a minute. Go ahead.
Oh, this is true. So yeah, I just think it's a flexible card, and it doesn't cost any fate to play, but it gives you the option to spend fate off of a character that you've already invested in to potentially win a conflict or cancel out another effect that's going to be really powerful for your opponent. Then I think it is definitely viable. Obviously, Scorpion are Seeker right now. It remains to be seen if they're going to be Seeker after Worlds, but and it's a 1 influence card as well, so it's splashable for people that like putting fate on guys and kind of want blank effects. Because if you can, being able to blank an opponent's character is a good thing to do. It does have a cost. So
yeah, it's cost of a turn with the character. So you can stick this on like your Sinister Associate or whatever, and then like you don't really care that much. So that seems fine to me.
The Sinister Associate, which you invested like 3 fate anyway, and it like doesn't matter. I mean, you're losing the 1 mill buff, which kind of sucks. See, I just like cards that are flexible. I like cards that give you multiple opportunities. So this is either like I'm going to get 1 mill and it might do something, or like maybe I'm just like I have to cancel out your ability real quick, and your opponent's just like, oh, I see.
Yeah, I would put it this way. I think this is like it's. We compared it to Cloud the Mind. I think it's worse than Cloud the Mind on anything that your opponent puts fate on, but better than Cloud the Mind on anything your opponent doesn't have fate on, basically. Because it gets more value. It gets more, or Cloud the Mind gets more value if it can stick on something that's going to stay there for a couple of turns. Mm-hmm. But Oni Mask actually gives you a little bit of stats and lets you like be a little more flexible with it. So
yep, doesn't require Shugenja either. So speaking of flexibility, though,
Gentry,
yeah,
I get the keeper card. So 0-cost event, backhanded compliment. Action: choose a player. That player draws 1 card and loses 1 honor. That's it. It's real cool. It sounds so simple, but like it's so powerful.
1 influence.
That's so good. 1 influence. So, it's so good though. Like either you're Scorpion and you don't care and you draw a card, or whatever you splash this in, you just draw a card and you're like, I only lose 1 honor, and this my opponent's playing for dishonor. It doesn't matter. Or you're playing for dishonor because you're probably Scorpion and playing this card, and then. Why do I care if they draw a card? I probably have them honor choked anyway. They're not drawing cards anyway. And I'll take the free honor for like pretty much nothing. It's so good. Like you have so many options with this card.
This can proc your stronghold.
I see literally no downside to this card in Scorpion. Like absolutely none at all. Also, we get to talk about the art on this card because the art is freaking amazing.
Art's very important for this one specifically.
Yeah, literally a Doji Whisperer standing there looking in a mirror with a Sinister Soshi staring over her shoulder at the mirror, and she's just super concerned.
Yeah, it's the Doji Whisper in the original art had a mirror just like this, and it looks strikingly. They both look very close. The mask on the Soshi looks very similar to the mask on this card, and this just looks like the Doji Whisper to me. Also, man, that flavor text. That flavor text. No one could accuse you of vanity with such a style.
It's a backhanded compliment. Exactly what they promised.
Yeah.
It is what it says on the tin.
I love everything about this card.
Again, just flexibility. Like, you cantrip yourself and your Scorpion. So, like I said, if you can trigger your box with this too, this actually didn't cost you anything. You just
this is true. I mean, that's what I'm saying too. Is that's the best part about Scorpion is because of the fact that you have your box. This is effectively free for you. You just draw a card. It just says cycle one card for you.
If you're splashing Scorpion, then you're cantripping for an honor, and you probably didn't care about honor anyway. And using honor as a card draw resource is really strong in this game right now because honor victories are difficult to do compared to what you could be doing.
Yeah,
so
pretty much
cantripping yourself when possible is not terrible, especially because it's one influence to splash. So if you just have extra influence, you're like whatever. Just cantrip the magic terms.
Yeah, it's basically it. It's a good card. I think you play it when you have the option.
Yeah. All right. Let's finish this off with the unicorn cards. I'll go first. I'll take this one because I feel like ranting about it. I'll take Chasing the Sun, which is a one-cost event, secret rule only. It is one influence and action during a conflict in which you are the attacking player. Move the contested ring to another eligible province and reveal it, if able. That province is now the attacked province.
You forgot to mention it's a quest.
Yeah, it's the most important part.
It is a mighty quest to chase that sun. This card seems very weird to me. I feel like there's not a lot of reason to go face check a second province, really, unless you say you face check Shameful Display, they can still use it before you can play this card. So, I guess if your character's already dishonored, you might as well run them into all the traps. But you're paying a fate to do so. This doesn't seem that good.
Yeah, I was like, this might be. If it were 0 fate, it might be okay. It might be a thing I'd run, and even then, I'd actually debate whether or not I wanted to run it. But for 1 fate, I really don't know how much I care.
Yeah,
I don't know why this is a thing that I want to do. I run into even if I'm splashing this, let's say, in Phoenix, the worst case scenario, I'm splashing this in Phoenix, I run into a Shameful Display with my Sukune or something. Do I really care that much? Is it really that big a deal that I want to play this card just for a situation exactly like that? I don't know. I don't think so.
I think the one kind of niche use for actually the 2 niche uses I can think for this are hitting a pilgrimage where you're not going to be able to break it, or you don't want to spend enough resources to break it, but you still want to get the ring effect, or you're running into an ancestral lands or entrenched position with whatever conflict type you're already doing, and you want to do something else to try and get a break. That's best. I think that's the best I can think of for this card. I find it interesting that they're kind of incorporating Unicorn's historic attacking multiple provinces thing in the form of events, as opposed to abilities on holdings or abilities on characters. So it just makes it a little bit clunkier, but we'll see. Well, someone's probably gonna blow me out with this card now, so it'll be cool.
I'd be interested to see if somebody plays this card and I completely lose because of it. I'll be happy about it. I will actually probably I'll be completely okay with getting destroyed by this card after calling it bad. But right now I'm pretty sure it's bad.
Yep. Let's go to the opposite card. Dan, last card.
So this is the keeper card for Unicorn. This is the Talisman of the Sun. This is a unique attachment, by the way. I don't know if we've had other unique attachments. This is the Talisman of the Sun.
Oh, Kazue.
Because she's a character, yeah.
Yeah.
Talisman of the Sun is a 1 fate attachment. Gives you 1 military, 1 political skill. Item, Meishodo. Keeper role only. Action. During a conflict in which you are the defending player, vow this attachment. Move the contested ring to another eligible province and reveal it, if able. That province is now the attacked province. So it's literally the opposite of Chasing the Sun.
That
On
makes
an
it way better.
Yeah, it's
which makes
way
it so much better for
yes.
some reason. Oh my
It
god!
also gives you
It's
+1/+1 in the meantime.
Oh, it's two influence too. So
Yeah.
guess who's splashing this card?
A lot of people, I think,
If
actually.
you're splashing Unicorn, I think you have a decent reason to splash this card as well. You can force people into Shameful Display. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
What else can you force people into? Meditations on the Tau. Does not work with Endless Plains,
again,
unfortunately.
we're definitely not biased on this cast, because as soon as I saw this, I was like, man, how many times does my opponent want to run into Kuroi Mori a turn? If the answer is all of them, Talisman of the Sun.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. It's a pretty sweet card. It doesn't require presence either to activate. You can just do it once you play it.
You know what's
That is
funny
neat.
is I just realized, so like, say they're attacking your stronghold province and you're losing. Normally, people haven't broken the other 4, so you still have one that's like unrevealed and unbroken. So say you're losing, like as a last ditch thing, you could actually just be like, "You're over here now."
Oh, that's true.
Actually, completely true. That's hilarious.
Wait, let me go back to Chasing the Sun.
This is actually, dude, that's huge. Now that I actually think about that, that's insane.
Just out of nowhere, you could be like,
you could actually just
yeah.
tell them that they're not allowed to win your conflict, that they're not allowed to ever attack your stronghold with all their guys, basically. They actually have to have enough strength to break your stronghold twice in the same turn.
Yeah.
With this card.
It's super sweet.
That's actually insane.
So you said you were going to go back to Chasing the Sun?
I wanted to just check it, and it does have the word eligible province, so you can't just Chasing the Sun
yes.
onto the stronghold.
Onto the stronghold. Turn 1 stronghold break. Let's
That
go.
would have been. I mean, this is first impression, and like, so like, I had to be sure, and like, if that card said that, then let me just quickly 180 my review
Yeah, I
of
was
that
gonna
card.
say, if that doesn't say eligible province,
Chasing the Sun,
Chasing the Sun is the best card.
That would have been.
It would have to cost like 3 fate,
Oh
and
my
it still
God.
probably wouldn't be balanced. It would be
3 fate,
broken as shit.
4, like 7 influence.
The
so you
3
can't
fate
splash
cavalry,
2
like,
of them.
the turn 2 cavalry charge that like Unicorn just pulls out of nowhere. They like cav reserves and then Chasing the Sun under your stronghold. You're like, why? That'd actually be cool.
That would be
Anyway.
ridiculous.
Talisman of the Sun.
Oh my
Yeah,
God,
because like
so
I said,
good.
because typically nobody breaks all 4 provinces, right? So there's going to be an eligible province somewhere. And then, like, especially if they've already expended a bunch of resources to fight you already. Oh my God!
Yeah, no,
It's
I like this card a
total
lot.
blowout.
I like this card a lot. 10 out of 10 card.
Yeah, that's the best part too. Is you can like play a bunch of stuff, like let them just play all their cards and go, yeah, I'm gonna break this province, and go, you're gonna go over here.
All right. So that's it for the Keeper and Secret cards. Lots of exciting stuff in there. Lots of meaningful decisions. And thank you, Fantasy Flight, for releasing that before Worlds so that we have like a good chunk of time for Worlds. It's like a month out. So we have a good chunk of time to think about what role we're going to go for. And I think for Phoenix, it's obviously Keeper because Guard Duty and Harmonize are both quite good. But I think for a lot of clans, they actually have a real meaningful choice.
I almost want to run Talisman of the Sun now.
I mean, I'm gonna put it in Tabletop Sim right after this episode goes up. So if
Yeah,
you
I
wanna
really
play
out.
with it, check out my Tabletop Sim mod, and I'm sure it'll go up on Ring Techie and Octagon soon as well. As well as you can just print it out and play with it.
Or
a
you
lot of
just
these
wait
are fun.
3 weeks and
Yeah, I was like, it's only
I know.
it's only 3 weeks away too before this. Set
That's
comes
true.
out.
3 weeks before the set comes out, 3 weeks before Worlds as well.
Yeah.
So let's go on to the meat of this episode. This episode was largely supposed to be dedicated to a Phoenix Clan deck tech, and unfortunately we've already spent 50 minutes discussing that new announcement. So this will likely be a longer episode. But for this deck tech, for the most part, it's not like a strict deck we're talking about here. We're talking about core set Phoenix because there's not a lot of deck building options. So we're just going to cover a lot of like what makes the core of a Phoenix deck. What their game plan is, maybe splashes to consider, best and worst matchups, advice, things like that. So we're basically just going to be breaking down our experience with Phoenix and like what we've been running and have been successful with. So I'm going to do this in a round table, so you guys can feel free to chime in with your thoughts as well. So I want to start with the basic idea of what the Phoenix game plan is. And I'll open us up with the Stronghold, which is generally the basis of where you want to start with any clan. The Phoenix Stronghold can be vowed to give a character +2 glory, so Phoenix are going to want either opponent's characters dishonored or their own characters honored, and that automatically sort of adds in a few cards into their deck, in my opinion, such as Court Games and For Shame, since they have enough courtiers for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty accurate with their Stronghold. The other thing that should be said is there's a couple of characters, there's a couple of effects rather, most specifically the Orator, that really likes having a little extra glory, and there's been more than one time that I've used the Stronghold solely to get the effect of Orator off and send somebody home from a conflict. So and it looks like that's probably going to be continuing for Phoenix as some kind of like glory effect, probably. I would assume that that's going to continue to be a thing. So
yeah. And I want to start first off with I also want to like put out their role as well. Keepers Phoenix are currently Seekers of the Void, meaning they can run 2 Void provinces. And I have found that their style of play is largely based on building incremental advantage and eventually being able to outvalue your opponent on the board. So generally they'll start off a little slow, they'll try to slow their opponent down, and eventually the Phoenix will have a board that your opponent cannot deal with.
Yeah, I think that's very accurate. It's very much a deck that wants to like keep the opponent from doing as much as possible, and they're very, very good at just kind of keeping their guys on board. And like they really like they're one of the few decks that I've seen so far that really likes to just heavy fate invest into a couple of big characters just to keep them around and just build wide enough that eventually their opponent can't stop them. Generally that's how you end up winning conflicts as Phoenix, is you get a couple of turns in and you just have so many characters with so much fate on them that your opponent can't stop you.
And so obviously the thing to worry about then as a Phoenix player is removal. So if you get guides that are dishonored, you're worried about things like I Can Swim. You're worried about cards like Assassinate. Anything that can, or things that can remove your fate or discard your guy. Death Seeker is another thing. Anything that can remove your guys or remove fate from your guys where you're losing that incremental board advantage is something you need to think about.
Yeah,
absolutely.
For sure. And at least in my experience, in terms of your win condition as Phoenix, it's generally going to be provinces. However, Phoenix actually make a pretty solid dishonor switch, even if they're not even dedicated dishonor, because a lot of people are drawing a lot of cards, and honor tends to go down as the game goes on, and Phoenix have a lot of tools for sort of just securing a dishonor win once your opponent's down low enough.
Yeah, I have to say, we'll get into it later when we talk about like more of the tech stuff, because I've been working on some more dishonor stuff with Phoenix. But even in my like general Phoenix deck, the like general Phoenix Dragon that most people are running right now, I've dishonored a couple of people out with that. I just kind of gotten 3 or 4 turns in and noticed, hey, my opponent only has 3 honor left because they've been bidding really high, and I get to draw cards from libraries, and they happen to just be assassinating things left and right. So I'll just go for that. And I've gotten a couple of games that I probably couldn't have won otherwise, that there's like no way I could have won through conflicts through dishonor, just because Phoenix has the tools to do so.
Yep. So, yeah, and like other strengths of the Phoenix clan are, or is rather another card that really helps them out, so it should be talked about with the Stronghold, is Kuroi Mori. And this is a card that a large number of people have kind of sighed, and at least in my play group online, people seem to like really decry this card as possibly the one card that might be a design mistake due to how powerful it is. Being able to switch the conflict type between military and political can often allow Phoenix to set up just a huge stat swing beyond like anything most clans can deal with easily. You need to have very balanced stats both ways, and then still win by 6 if it's on the Stronghold. And if nothing else, you can also use it to control the ring and set up your Shugenja. So this is probably the most powerful clan province in the game, and it's definitely one of those things that allows Phoenix to slow the game down. If you do get to their Stronghold, you're going to have to be winning by quite a lot, in my experience, in order to break Kuroi Mori, or you just need to have the correct cards on board to be able to ignore it. And certain factions have a very hard time with that.
Yeah, that's actually the other thing is, the Dishonor is cool too, but the Kuroi Mori is another card that single-handedly has won me games. You know, it by itself slows the game down so much that you can sometimes just kind of come back from a situation that you really shouldn't be able to, just because your opponent has to win by so much in order to actually make a difference. Like Kuroi Mori being able to switch every conflict that they run into basically is actually just absurd. The fact that you have to win basically by 6 military and political skill during a conflict there in order to break a stronghold is it might actually I actually might agree it might actually be a design mistake. That may be the one card that's more powerful than I think was intended.
I definitely think it's possible to play around. It's one of the things when your opponent's attacking into it, they have to think about, I can't just buy out my dynasty, I buy out my provinces and bid 5 and know I'm going to break the stronghold on this attack. You have to really plan for it and set up a good board situation and a good hand situation. So that's the benefit of playing Phoenix, right? Is the fact that if you're forcing your opponent to do a little bit extra thinking and not just like rush at you, then you get a little bit time to like execute your game plan or not worry about losing. Which one thing I've noticed in this game, if you're at a point where you don't have to worry about losing at all, that's great. Like you only have to worry about executing your game plan and not about what your opponent's going to do to you, is a really good position to be in.
Yeah, 100%. And so Kuroi Mori is definitely a card that sort of defines the Phoenix archetype right now. It's going to be a really tough thing when Phoenix are no longer Seeker or Void to choose between Kuroi Mori and Shameful Display, because both do a lot for them. And it kind of just depends on what sort of archetypes end up opening themselves up. But I think that's a good intro to like sort of begin a basis of the Phoenix. I want to go now into what cards are like the core of a Phoenix deck. So I want you guys to sort of we'll go in like a round table sort of way, like we normally do with card reviews. But we're each gonna say a card and why we think that card is going to be core to the Phoenix decks for at least a little while.
Can I start with this?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm gonna take the easy one and pick Shiba Sukune.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting one, actually. I'm not sure I agree with.
So what I think,
Fair.
what I think is core about her is just the fact that her ability allows you to fire rings off while you're on the defensive. So like when Gentry was talking about with his Dishonor style deck, the fact that you don't necessarily have to worry about winning on attack every single time between Sukune and Display of Power means that you can play a little bit defensive, but you're still executing your game plan. I just think she's a good all around for supporting your ability to just continue to manipulate the board turn over turn.
I think that's very fair, actually. Shiba Sukune is by far, in a way, my favorite clan champion in the game because of the amount of options she opens up, and she kind of forces you and your opponent to think differently about the rings they're claiming, and you plan around her, basically. So the nice thing about her is that she does basically say you don't really need to attack with Void to get the Void effect. You don't need to attack with Fire to get the Fire effect. And there's so many good ring effects out there that are like incremental. And again, I said early on, Phoenix is about incremental advantage. She is incremental advantage, the clan champion. Every turn, getting you probably 2 different effects that help you further towards a win condition.
Like just getting an Earth Ring trigger every turn. Like that's one, like not sometimes people don't pick a lot, but if you get an Earth Ring trigger every turn, like you're getting an extra card and they're losing a card. If you're getting Air Ring triggers, like you're stealing an honor, or you're gaining 2 honor if you want to go that way. I just think like compared to some of the other clan champions, which kind of have to be in conflict or they have to be aggressive to kind of take full advantage of them. The fact that she can just be passive is actually a huge advantage, because it means she can attack, right? Because she has 4 glory, so she can be a big body, but she can also sit back and still affect board. Exactly. Whereas like, Taturi and Hotaru really want to be in conflicts and doing things. Shoju wants to be in conflicts and poisoning people. I don't know what he does technically, but
technically, yeah. Whatever he does to make that
whatever
happen.
he does to kill them with his political skills. Yokuni is going to copy like aggressive effects and give Dragon some advantage that way. And obviously Kasada is just a denial effect, but you have a 7-body beater, so you want him to fight. But yeah, Sukune is just awesome because she can sit back and still fight, so you get flexibility.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's probably the only. It's one of very few cards in the game that actually just warps the entire game around it, makes the game entirely different. And with that, she's also one of the only things that I've seen. One of the like biggest reasons I've seen in this game to just not declare conflicts. There's a lot of times where you play Sukune, where like I have a Sukune on board, and my only goal is just to make sure that my opponent doesn't win conflicts, and I don't ever declare a conflict of my own for like 2 or 3 turns in a row, just because I know I'm getting all the value from Sukune that I need.
That is a good reason as well. The only ring she doesn't work with is the water ring, and the water ring is a fantastic ring if you're playing defensively. It allows you to restand defenders, and Phoenix generally have some balanced stats on some of their better characters, so it allows you to defend with the character in one conflict and then attack water and ready them for another defense or maybe a second attack later. So
that's a classic Lion strategy.
Admittedly, water is like probably the best ring to attack with in Phoenix because of adaptive waves as well, which we'll probably talk about here in a few minutes.
So Sukune is definitely a clan champion. I'm not, and the reason I said I'm not so sure on her being a staple is because we've seen Kaede now. And it's going to be either a real choice, or maybe they can run both Kaede and Shiba Sukune. It's hard to say. But I'm really excited to see how that pans out.
Yeah, I am interested to see if Kaede actually affects the deck and makes you choose between them. It might actually just come down to running both of them, because they're both incredible cards that warp the game.
Yep. We'll just have to wait and see. Gentry, why don't you give us a card that you think is a staple to the Phoenix game plan?
So I'm gonna go slightly different. I'm gonna leave like the really obvious one, but I'm gonna go with Shiba Yojimbo.
Ooh,
that's what I was thinking actually.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of other ones that are really obvious, but Shiba Yojimbo, the deck seems to be going in the way. It's already pretty heavy on the Shugenja. It seems like it's going to be further into Shugenja. The fact that Shiba Yojimbo basically makes them immune to all of the good effects right now is just enormous. And she doesn't have to even be in the conflict. You can actually just leave her behind and protect her, and just send in your like Adepts and your Masahiros, your Atsukos and stuff like that, your Fearsome Mystics, and just not really care about what happens, because they're going to run in, and you can't get court games, you can't get routed, you can't get outwitted. Somehow, if you're going to get outwitted.
Can't get bowed by an attacking LPB, you just like...
Yeah, it's really huge. And like even things like Doji Challenger, like you can't get Doji Challenger, your Shugenja can't get Doji Challenger into a conflict. That can
You can't get Yogo Heroade into a conflict.
You can't get Yogo Heroade into a conflict. That could be huge, especially if you're playing something like Tsuko. If your Atsuko is at risk of getting dishonored by a Heroade, and your Shiba Yojimbo is protecting it, that's insane. Like that's huge amounts of value for you. And it's just, I don't know, it's such a good card. Like you have one character on the board that is pretty decently statted anyway. Like you actually, I would almost play it just for the stat line anyway, if it had even a slightly worse effect. But the effect is so good for so many of your characters that the character just goes over the top. And I don't think there's any, I can't imagine a deck that doesn't play Shiba Yojimbo for the foreseeable future.
As long as Phoenix have Shugenjas, you're going to have the Yojimbo, because it's like it's a 3-cost guy that you're pretty much going to get value out of, because it's going to be denying your opponent something. Like I've stared at huge Shiba Yojimbos and been like, I don't know how to deal with this right now. And so you end up having to focus on like, how do I get rid of the Yojimbo to get at Phoenix's Shugenja, so that way I can actually like make progress on attacking provinces. Just like, it's a whole thing that's makes it a really good card, right? Like any card that forces your opponent to play differently is going to be good, right? It really affects the board in a very significant way.
And as more Shugenja get released and we maybe see less courtiers, for example, I think that's like the main thing it's going to remove. This card is going to be like a staple in that sort of deck. Just forcing your opponent to target it with everything seems fine to me. All right, so I'm going to go on with one of my personal favorite cards now, which is the Radiant Orator. I'm not entirely sure how long she'll actually stay indexed, but I've just seen so many games where she's done so much work for me as a 3-coster that I just slapped 2 extra fate on. And that's just the ability to just move home practically anyone in any conflict, because you're Phoenix and most other clans can't keep up with you in glory, and if they can, then you can usually still beat them by 1 point required to activate her. It's just huge. It's a nice defensive tool, and it forces your opponent to basically think about how they commit, and maybe even overcommitting into a display of power.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing about Radiant Orator too is like, especially with your box, the fact that you can give 2 glory to anything. This card is almost always going to go off when you need it to go off, and it single-handedly wins conflicts. I mean, there are a lot of conflicts where I've had my opponent send in 3 characters against just my Orator. I'll send in an Orator box turn 1, and then just send something home and win against their 3 character against what was a 3-character conflict with just an Orator, because she's just that good. On top of that, she's a courtier, which turns on for shame, which is even better, which makes it even better.
Yeah.
So
you get more courtier.
The only way that this card could be better than it is right now is if it were also a Shugenja somehow, and we're like immune to everything with a Yojimbo on board, but that would actually be broken.
If it were slightly higher statted, it'd be almost broken, right? So like if it had like
too.
it was like 1/3 political, oof. Which is like seems really minor, but that one, like bumping from 2 to 3 is like
pretty freaking big,
fairly significant, because it means that a single like fan makes it so that way they can solo break a political province,
which is huge for an Orator, because you can send it in by yourself and make sure that you have to defend with at least 2 characters if you want to even have the chance of having a defender left.
Yeah, I just send home effects in this game are very good when timed correctly, and she's just having additional send home effects on top of having outwit and route. If you're running route, I don't know if you're running route in Phoenix necessarily, but
I'm not.
Yeah, outwit, I guess, in this case, but is just solid, because you're denying your opponent conflict in some cases, which is what we talked about with Harmonize, actually. So there you go.
Oh, yeah. With Harmonize, this card is really nice too. Being able to send home another 3-cost guy is super sweet.
Yeah, that's actually insane. You can send in the Orator, send 1 character home, for shame a character, send a character home with Harmonize. Like, she could solo defend so easy.
Yeah.
She just wags her finger and says, no.
No, she's mom.
The Kembe Mutombo of L5R.
She's mom. She says, what are you doing here? Go to your room. And then you go to your room and you're kind of sad.
Sad and go to your room.
Yeah, she's a fantastic defensive character and helps you get incremental advantage out of those cards.
Let's not even mention that she's like probably the best in this, like one of the best cards in this deck for breaking Stronghold too. Because if you're gonna send all of your guys in, you're gonna have more Gloria than your opponent. And when you have like 2, there's been plenty of times where I've had 2 Orators on board going into a Stronghold and just gone, yeah, I don't like those 2 characters. They can just go home now.
Yep, and that's the nice thing about putting extra fate on her, is that you'll likely have multiple on board for those big pushes.
Yeah, she's incredible. I agree.
Oh, I mean, I was gonna say you guys could talk about Kata, or I mean, do we want to talk about display? We all agree that display of power is like insane, right? So, I just think you want it. Like, you just want it in hand. Anyway, so I'm going to pick Display of Power just because it also kind of exemplifies Phoenix play, like, kind of defensive play style, or like turnabout play style, right? So Display of Power is the 2-cost event that is after you lose an unopposed conflict. You cancel the ring effect, then you resolve it as if you were attacking, and you get to claim the ring. So it's it's not only your opponent committed resources to something, probably to break a province, so they're wasting cards. You're spending 2 fate is fairly minimal in the conflict phase, right? Especially now, because we're dealing with more fate now in games, so we have a lot more stuff to play around with. You get to resolve whatever ring effect they wanted to resolve, which is probably super beneficial for you. Say it was like fire, so now you have an honored guy, or you can dishonor one of their people on defense, or like say they were going for water, now you can bow their guy. And you get to claim the ring. So whenever you're going for the Imperial favor, which is going to be more important, I think, as the Imperial cycle rolls out, as from some of the other cards that we've seen, being able to use the Imperial favor for some other effects. Having that +1 for that can be important. But yeah, basically canceling your opponent's entire attack, resolving the ring on your own, and claiming the ring is just such a huge blowout. A lot.
Yeah, like cards just wins games. There's always going to be that conflict that kind of hinges on the ring effect going off, and Display of Power denies that, gives it to you, and completely swings the board state. I think a prime example of this actually happened twice in one turn, where I just had I don't remember if it was a solo Sukune or if it was just like a Sukune one, but I was against Scorpion, and I had like Sukune was like the bulk of my board, and he attacked fire, and so I had already seen 2 Forged Edicts at that point in the game, blowing them onto the thing, and so I felt pretty safe to just go, all right, I'm going to declare no defenders, display power of that fire ring, and honor Sukune. Sweet, my turn to attack. Sukune attacks with 8, buffer up to 10 with the Stronghold. He didn't have a dishonor effect because again, they do run out eventually.
Right. Eventually,
this was pretty late in the game. And then I broke a province, and then he attacked me with water. I did have another guy, because he was either attacking water to ready his guy from the first conflict, or to bow one of my guys with a fate. I don't remember which. But anyway, he attacked with water, and then I displayed powered again, and readied Sukune, and then broke another province with 10 strength. So like things like that do happen, and they happen every game. So that's one of the main reasons I think to run display power over any other card that might fill that expensive event slot.
No, I agree. I think Display of Power is insanely good, but I will say that I am in the 2-of camp right now. I tend to not need more than like 1 or 2 of them a game, and you tend to draw a lot as Phoenix.
I don't tend to draw my entire deck though. I want to see 1 or 2 a game. I don't necessarily need to play 3.
That's what I say. Like, I think you want to see 2 in a game, and considering you can only like include 3 copies, you kind of need to run 3 in your 40 to guarantee that you're going to see them in your top, 20 cards, right? So
I don't know. I've been
talk about Forgotten Library then
so far, but yeah, this is true. I've been playing with Display of Power at 2 for a little while, and I've been pretty happy with 2 of them. I don't know. It might eventually bump up. It might eventually go down to 1. It depends on what the next cycle is. But I can actually see a case where this goes down slightly depending on the way the decks change.
Potentially, yeah. I think one of the main reasons I do have it at 3 right now is because there's a lot of flex slots for Phoenix, and I feel Display of Power is one of the better cards you can put in those slots.
Yeah,
to fill out your conflict deck right now. So thank you, Dan. Display of Power is definitely one of my all-time favorites.
I picked 2 like super easy peasy ones. That was kind of
lame. one of the last really impactful and really like staple dynasty characters for Phoenix, and that's Isawa Atsuko, or as I like to passionately call her, Evil Grandma. So Evil Grandma drinks her evil tea, and then she comes and destroys your face, because during a Void conflict, she is the swingiest card in the game. She is like an honored general for you and an anti-honored general for your opponent in both conflict types with balanced stats. And she's one of the stronghold busters, really. If you have like, if it's like, say like an average case for like a conflict that matters, 4 characters participating, she is effectively a 7/7. That's before being honored, before the stronghold maybe comes into play. And a lot of late game board states, especially with Phoenix building up those boards, tend to have like 4 or 5 characters on your side alone. So she's automatically at least an 8/8. So
yeah,
I
you
love
don't even
Evil
have
Grandma.
to put her in the conflict.
And she's unique. So you can just invest in her. You'll probably see a couple extra dupes later on down the line, and that'll keep her alive even longer.
I was gonna say, yeah, she really is like. There's a couple of characters in this deck that are clearly made just to break strongholds, and she's the other one. It's like Orator's really, really good for it, and Atsuko's really, really good for it. And a lot of times you end up sending them in together, and things just are dumb because she ends up being, especially against stronghold provinces at the end of the game, where like you have 3 or 4 characters at least going into the conflict, and your opponent's sending everything that they have because they have to stop you. She ends up being more like a 10-10 more often against strongholds, because you're doing at least 3 or 4 characters per side at +1/+1 for you, -1/-1 for them. So she really does just win conflicts. If you ever if you plan on winning a void conflict, you just play Natsuko, and it just happens.
And it also really disincentivizes your opponent from playing void against you, or rather makes it really easy so that your void is harder to dismantle. And if you do trigger her ability, she kind of solo breaks provinces as well. So
yeah,
that's another nice boon. 4 is kind of a magic number, rather winning by 4, and she helps you win by 4 quite easily. So yeah, there's not really a whole lot to go into there, other than she's a fantastic Shugenja, and I feel like it's going to be a long time before we see her removed from decks, or we've got to see some really bomb 4 drops to replace her.
How cheaty do I want to be with this one? I just forgot a library. You're gonna play it. You draw a card every turn. That's it. It's a holding that says draw a card every turn. It's Imperial Storehouse on steroids. That's it. There's nothing else to say about it. It really isn't. It's just pure value. Yep. There's a good reason that everybody runs into your library province every turn that they have the chance, regardless of what it is.
Yeah, and this sort of really also sort of works well with that incremental advantage style, right? Every turn you protect your library, that's another card you draw. That's more of a state you are getting ahead of your opponent. So again, really promoting a grindier style with Phoenix, and trying to slowly win the game rather than try and win it quickly.
Yeah, and Forgotten Library is incredible.
Yep, and it's really fun when it's on top of a shameful display.
That's the best.
Oh my god.
I find people will usually just leave it rather than try and break it. But every once in a while, you get a guy who wants to really break that province, and then I get a couple triggers off Shameful Display in the meantime.
Getting Shameful Display to trigger twice in a game is bonkers. So
especially in Phoenix, where your glory count is definitely higher than your opponent's.
Yep. All right, I think there's only maybe a handful more cards that are probably worth mentioning. So let's do one more each, and then we'll move on.
Sure.
So what other cards do you think are like staples of the Phoenix game plan?
Staples of the Phoenix game plan. So this is just kind of me personally, because I like being a little bit more aggressive, but I really like adaptive waves. So the fact that Covert's just really strong in this game because it just nullifies a character, and the fact that he's just Shugenja means that it's something that you can protect with your Shiba Yojimbo. He's decently statted at 2/2. It has 2 glory as well, so it works with your Radiant Orator when you're attacking with him. Water conflicts are very good, both in terms of being aggressive because you defended with somebody and then you can ready them. It just helps you manipulate your board or manipulate your opponent's board. So it's just a solid 2-drop character that I think is going to fit in most Phoenix decks for a while, unless something comes along that kind of fills in a similar slot in terms of canceling out another opponent's character.
I don't completely disagree with you. I think that it's really good right now. I think that Covert is one of the best right now, but I think with the stipulation that it has to be a water ring, and the fact that the stats are okay, but they're not great for what the card is. I think that there comes a point where this card probably gets replaced in some decks. I think it'll still be played in certain decks, especially if an aggressive Phoenix deck becomes a thing. I think Adaptive Waves becomes a lot better. My personal Dragon Phoenix, or Phoenix Dragon right now rather, is a little more on the aggressive side. I'm actually running I'm actually running as much Covert as I can for the sake of running into provinces, but I don't know that this card sticks around forever in Phoenix decks. I think it might even get taken out of some decks during this first cycle, depending on what cards come out. This is one card that I actually wouldn't be that sad to get rid of.
I just think there's nothing in the 2-drop slot though. You want, because you kind of need a nice spread of characters across fate costs, so that way when you flip, you've got things to buy. And I think at a 2-drop, he just gives you a lot of value in terms of potentially getting a Covert on there, but also being a Shugenja, so you can trigger some of your other Shugenja based events. And then it's obviously something that's also immune. If you have a Shiba Yojimbo on board, it's something that's immune to being assassinated. And so your opponent's I don't know what to do against this guy.
Yeah,
So-
like I said, I agree with you mostly. I think right now it's
Yeah.
definitely really good, but I could actually see even in this cycle, like maybe cutting it down to 2 or taking it out of my deck, depending on what comes out in the cycle. I agree that we definitely need a 2-drop to replace it though, because that is currently the like only 2-drop that I'm playing.
I think I agree with Dan here. I think this is one of the best 2-drops in the core set that we've seen. Covert is really strong. Water Ring is like one of the better rings to use Covert with, because you can covert someone with no fate on them and then bow them with the Water Ring. So it allows you to be aggressive with the Water Ring without them just defending with their guy with no fate. And additionally, it, as I said before, Water Ring is rather nice for Phoenix, allowing them to defend and then ready with the Water Ring. So he's a nice counterpunch character. And bonus points because you can always get value out of him, even in a world full of assassination. You can use his action before a conflict begins, and if your opponent assassinates him, you've already used his action. You've already gotten the majority of what makes the card good. So even without a Yojimbo, he's fairly resilient to the assassination meta, and that's why I like him a lot. And I don't see him leaving, at least not for a couple cycles, probably. Again,
Yeah, I don't know. It might not. It'll probably stay in the deck for this cycle, but yeah, I definitely think this is one of the cards that's like borderline for me, where like I'll probably keep it, but there's a chance that I'll get rid of it. This is probably like if I cut a card from my current deck to switch things out, this will be like the last Dynasty character that comes out. Like
I'm not so sure.
I can see that actually.
Yeah, I was like anything better than this card is definitely staying in. This card is like right on the line for me, where I want to keep it really, like I really want to keep it, but there might just be something that slightly edges it out, and I could see that happening.
I think I got other 2-drops to drop before you drop this one, so I think this one will probably stay in for a while. At least in the Shugenja theme deck. If we get like a Courtier theme deck, maybe then I could see you dropping him and running the Courtiers instead. But I think I'd drop a Diplomat or something instead of this guy in a heartbeat.
He's a Shugenja, so you can play Consumed by the 5 Fires.
Yeah, you can.
Speaking of Shugenja, actually, I'm going to go ahead and give us what I consider probably one of the best Phoenix cards right now, and that is Supernatural Storm.
Okay. Yeah, wait for a second. Continue.
Yeah, if you pick the last card I'm thinking of, there's one more card I want to talk about, and I think you're probably going to pick it. But anyway, Supernatural Storm is a fantastic card. It is a stat boosting event that gives +X+X, where X is the number of Shugenja you control. So you should already be thinking this is going to get better with more Shugenja, which apparently are coming down the line, because we're getting Kaede in the first pack, and probably at least a few more in the later packs of the first cycle. It's already consistent enough that I usually get 2 or 3 out of it, and sometimes the rare 4 when the board gets big enough. But just the fact that this is an untyped, you can use it in both conflicts, and it's uncapped. It's not like a Bonsai where it's capped at once per conflict. And the value of this card is that you can use it in addition to Bonsai. So if your opponent Bonsais you, or you Bonsai your opponent and they Bonsai in return, you can use Supernatural Storm to still win that conflict and give yourself the stat boosting edge that your opponent doesn't have, because it's Phoenix only and it scales with Shugenja, and who the hell is splashing this card? So this fits in there with Way of the Lion.
This is another reason Adaptive Waves is good, because he's Shugenja.
This fits in there with Way of the Lion, in my opinion, just in terms of like it's just an extra stat boost, and like if you have the extra stat boost and your opponent doesn't have the extra stat boost, all other things equal, you'll win, because you've got that extra card you can play, and you can play multiple in the same conflict. It's a nice extra pushing card, and it gives Phoenix the punching power they kind of need sometimes to break provinces.
Yeah, Supernatural Storm's just really good. I mean, you have. It seems like we're going to be getting even more Shugenja, like you were saying too, as we go forward. So I think it's only going to get better. I don't think there's a world where this card ever comes out, because I think it only becomes better as more Shugenja come out.
If you aren't running Shugenja, then you probably take it out. But if you're running, Shugenja at all.
If there ever comes a time, I mean, this is the same thing with Shiba Yojimbo, right? Like we were talking about Shiba Yojimbo being like one of the best cards in the deck. Yeah, in a world where I don't play Shugenja, that card is garbage, but I don't think that's going to happen. I'm pretty sure that we're going to have a ton of Shugenja no matter what deck this comes.
You almost just kind of want to run predominantly Shugenja, because Supernatural Storm being a 0-cost stat boosting, like a non-restricted event, is so good. And it can be on defense too. Like, come on.
It's very nice in that regard. And again, it seems like we're going towards the Shugenja style, or at least the Shugenja style is definitely getting better. And the Glory style is currently not amazing. And maybe courtiers become a thing at some point if we get a couple more courtiers. But for now, it seems like Shugenja is the way to play, and more Shugenja seem to be coming. So
You don't want high glory Bushi. That's not your
Yeah.
thing.
That could be a thing, but I don't know.
I got one more card. Gentry, what's your last pick?
Oh God. There's two really big ones. And
Okay.
As
Well,
good
one
as
of them-
a lot of the neutrals are. As good as a lot of neutrals are for this deck.
I'm thinking like Phoenix only cards, but yeah,
You
there's
want Phoenix
neutrals.
only cards? Because there's
Yeah.
one neutral. There's one neutral card that feels like it is kind of Phoenix only. That feels like it's like built for Phoenix, and I think it has to be said.
I know
Because
Cloud the Mind, but let's do Phoenix only, and we'll talk about neutrals when we get into like.
I was like, because Cloud, like, as much as so my second card then would be Against the Waves. I was to say, like, the only reason I want to say Cloud the Mind is because Cloud the Mind I feel like it's significantly more impactful in most cases. But if we're gonna stick with Phoenix only, Against the Waves, this was my other card I wanted to talk about. It just readies or bows a Shugenja. We've already talked about the fact that ready and bow effects are pretty strong. This one is, you're always going to get value out of it because you're almost always going to have a Shugenja to ready on your side. So you're going to have at least one character that you can send consistently into a couple of conflicts. And if it happens to be like an Atsuko or a Masahiro, then it's even better because it's just going to be a really good card to send into multiple conflicts. But secondarily, I've honestly got a decent amount of value using it against other people, using it against like opponents' Shugenja as well.
Bow that Kitsu Spirit Caller, please.
Yeah, I was to say the Spirit Caller is one of the biggest ones. Like
Yokuni?
bowing a Spirit Caller is huge. Bowing a Yokuni is insane.
Oh,
That one That one I've actually
I don't know
only
why I
gotten to
forgot
do
about
one.
that.
That one I've only actually gotten to do one time. I don't know why. When I play against Dragon, I just never see a Yokuni on board. I don't know how
that's
that
so
happens.
brutal.
I've gotten really lucky against Dragon somehow. I've just kind of not seen Yokunis. Secondarily, too, you can do cool things like Masahiro bows for his effect. You can just bow him for his effect and still get him into a conflict later on, which is super cool. And I personally really like Fearsome Mystic for that, because Fearsome Mystic was one card where I was like debating about bringing it up earlier. The fact that you can just take a bunch of fate off of enemy characters is real good. And it makes your opponent really think hard before they send anybody with fate into a conflict. Because yet again, it's one of those things where you're gonna have more glory than your opponent if you want to. Like, you can just make it happen no matter what. And with Against the Waves, you could actually just send Fearsome Mystic into every conflict that happens in a turn. This being, I'm gonna not even declare any conflicts.
Yeah.
I don't even have to. I can just let them attack me with all of their characters and send Fearsome Mystic in every single time and tell them that they're
Grind
gonna lose all
their
their fate.
board out.
Yeah, exactly. You just take all the fate off of their characters, just slowly suck it out. It's really good. So,
I think
Against the Waves has so many uses, and it's really, really good. A card that just says bow or ready a character is just
Ready effects are good.
Good to you. Yeah,
And
exactly.
bow effects are good.
It's always going to be
Welcome to
useful.
the Winter Court podcast. Bow effects are good. Ready effects are good. That's all you need to know about this game anymore.
I think all the cards mentioned here pretty well summarize, I think, some of the core idea of the Phoenix plan. And the Phoenix plan right now is very Shugenja based. So a lot of our cards were like Against the Waves with first Shugenja, Supernatural Storm, and a lot of the most powerful characters we mentioned were also Shugenja. Kaede we didn't get to because honestly I don't feel like I can say much about how much she'll see play. But what Gentry was saying about Fearsome Mystic, I think I would actually just swap Kaede out, because Kaede, by giving you that extra Void Ring on attack, kind of fulfills the same role as the Mystic. Yojimbo protects your Shugenja, Atsuko is a Shugenja, Adeptive Waves is a Shugenja. A lot of the most powerful cards are all Shugenja and Shugenja based. So I think right now, if you want to build a really solid Phoenix deck, start with the Shugenja theme, and then work out from there. You put in the cards you find valuable. So some good neutral cards, I think, to run. Outside of, I'm going to call the Cardinal 4 right now. I think every deck should probably start with 3 Vine Katanas, 3 Ornate Fan, 3 Court Game, and 3 Bonsai. And then you might cut 1 or 2 of specific ones there depending on your deck style. But right now, with the card pool being kind of constrained, those 12 neutral cards are a solid base that gives you good political and good military boosts to win conflicts, and winning conflicts helps you win games.
And I think the best thing about them too is that they're 0 cost. So you're going to be able to play them. You don't have to, you can go into the conflict phase with no fate and still have like options for boosts. They're not always like the most exciting, but they're basic, and that sometimes that's all you need.
Yep.
I would say that's generally good. Secondarily, because of the way this deck works, again, like I said, you just run Cloud the Mind. I almost think it's a Phoenix card. It was like designed for Phoenix, honestly.
Well, Phoenix are the only ones right now with enough Shugenja to really always have it on.
There are a couple of other decks that run it. But...
Dragon can run it fairly consistently, and Crane can run it fairly consistently.
Yeah, I think that's basically it. Too. It's basically the only 3 decks, and Phoenix is the only one that definitely runs 3 of it all the time. So, also, random interesting note, my latest Phoenix deck is running exactly 0 Katana, but we'll bring that up later.
Yeah. And then, in addition to Cloud the Mind, I think Assassination is kind of card of the meta right now. Assassination is a big deal, and Phoenix have the ability to run it without much issue because they have a lot of supplemental card draw and really impactful events. So typically, if you're not drawing as many cards to offset that honor loss from playing multiple assassinations, it's probably okay. You should be relatively safe from dishonoring out. Last thing I want to talk about, besides covering those like core neutrals, I want to talk about provinces. So being Seeker of Void, I think it's pretty safe to say that you should always run Shameful Display and Kuroi Mori in basically every Phoenix deck. And then from there, it's your choice. Most people are running Manicured Garden and Meditations on the Tau because those are nice incremental provinces that if you defend them, you can get lasting value over and over. As you defend them multiple times, you can trigger them multiple times. And then for the last province, it's kind of up in the air whether you want to do an Earth or a Water province. If you do an Earth, typically people are doing Entrenched Position because we tend to be stronger at political than military. But Ancestral Lands is also fine. And for Water, I'm partial to Rally to the Cause, but Elemental Fury is fine too.
Yeah, I've been running Elemental Fury personally, but I can see really good reason for Rally, and I've been debating switching just to try it out a little bit.
I like Rally to give me the flexibility to put Rally on my Stronghold and run Kuroi Mori in my home 4 provinces to get me extra fate from Seeker of Void during the open parts of the game. Against factions where I don't really need Kuroi Mori on my Stronghold, it just helps keep the game incrementally going in my favor because it's just another province that once they hit it and they have to break it before I stop using its effect. So yeah, I think you should probably start with Manicured Garden, Meditations on the Tau, Kuroi Mori, and Shameful Display, and then just pick one last province that fits your style the best. It's pretty evenly balanced between the other 4.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much fair.
That's fair.
I think the 4 are very core to this deck. I don't think there's ever any reason not to run those 4.
Yep.
At the very least.
And
maybe we'll see some provinces that are cool, but I think in the meantime, like those 4 are they're going to give you a pretty solid base to operate out of. The things you definitely don't want to do are not include Kuroi Mori. That seems not a good idea. And then obviously because you have the option to put another Void province in there, Shameful Display just gives you so many options because you have high glory guys, so you can leverage that to your advantage.
Yep. And going from there as well, let's talk about allies. So we've mentioned Phoenix have a very grindy style, and I'll start with the ally I've sort of paved from the beginning that fits that grindy style is Dragon. Mainly splashing for Miyamoto's Fury, which is a defensive event that bows pretty much any attacker whenever you want. Very rarely does a character have more glory than you have unrevealed provinces until the very, very tail end of the game. And Miyamoto's Fury just helps you get there. And early on, it will let you safely leave provinces undefended just because you can pay a fate and deny the conflict.
Yeah, and I think that's very fair.
Yeah.
Interestingly, when I splash dragon, and we'll talk about my other splash later. But when I splash dragon, I'm actually not playing Miraboto's Fury at all. I've decided instead to play Tattooed Wanderer in place of the Miraboto's Fury. I like to play. I don't know. I play heavy control, but I find that I like the option of being slightly aggressive and being able to push provinces when I really need to, and having the most covert in the game in Phoenix. Although there are a couple of other decks that can have 6 covert cards, I think it's easiest in Phoenix to actually run all of the covert to a successful degree. Actually makes for really, really good pushes. It makes it very easy to just run into a province and make sure that they can't have any defenders.
Yeah, alongside Fury, Tattooed Wanderer is definitely an option. I think the Ancestral attachments are also a nice option, and Let Go is, of course, always an option if you want to have more attachment hate. But I think Fury, for me, it just helps you get... I think if you stall the game long enough as Phoenix, the provinces will come. You will break provinces, because Phoenix is... When Phoenix has a big enough board, they're quite powerful, if not one of the most powerful factions in the game.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair to say.
That's my argument for Dragon Splash. I know, Gentry, you've been doing an interesting splash. Tell us about it.
So yeah, my recent one I wanted to play around with. We literally went for this podcast, and he was like, all right, I was like, I've already played so much Phoenix, so I guess do I just try weird splashes? I've been playing with Crab Splash recently, and playing for Strict Dishonor, and I'm surprisingly happy with the results. It's far better than I actually thought it was going to be. I'm still playing around with how the deck is going to function, and I'm still putting it in. But right now, what I'm doing is I'm splashing 3 Watch Commander and a Reprieve out of Crab, and then running contingency plans. I'm actually running 3 Mediator now instead of. I haven't decided what to take out. That was actually a recent addition. I decided to try out 3 Mediator, and I'm trying out a Seeker of. I don't even remember the name of the card because it's
Enlightenment.
Plays it Seeker of Knowledge.
Oh, that one.
I'm actually playing a Seeker. I'm actually trying out a
about.
Seeker of Knowledge for the sake of getting Iron Ring, but it plays a little differently than normal Phoenix. It's still a little slower. I still want to prevent my opponents from winning rings as much as possible, but typically the game plan for my Crab Phoenix ends up going more along the lines of try and get the air and void rings and things like that, keep their board low, and dishonor and take as much honor as you can through the air and fire rings. And then generally you can get some advantage early if you play through draws. But what I found is basically this. You either draw a few, you don't draw as many cards as your opponent. Your opponent gives you a lot of honor for drawing a lot of cards, and then ends up having to play around all of your dishonor stuff, which makes a lot of the cards in their hand less useful. And then you win through dishonor. Or they don't draw as many cards because they know that you're trying to dishonor them, and then you get the advantage because you have a lot of incremental pushes through Sukune and Library, and even little things like Naive Students. And you can just kind of push the advantage that way, where they're so afraid to draw cards because they don't want to give you honor, because they don't want to lose honor, that you just kind of have an advantage and you can push through provinces anyway. And it's basically what I've been finding. I'm still refining the deck a little bit because it's something I haven't tried that much. I've played 4 games of it so far, but I've been surprised by the results. It's been surprisingly good at choking out card draw or dishonoring somebody out. And all of my wins, I'm actually 3-1 with it right now. And every single win that I've had has been through dishonor, including a Crane deck, which surprised me a lot. I expected to go for provinces against Crane and ended up dishonoring it somehow anyway.
Yeah, I think the Dishonored Phoenix deck is certainly an interesting one that has a lot of merit going towards it. I'm not sure it's entirely there yet in terms of consistency compared to just breaking provinces, but it has the edge of being a surprise factor. No one really expects Phoenix Dishonor right now. I think it's fairly safe to say. So when you suddenly bid 1 to their 5 and then start dropping Watch Commanders on your guys, and you can finish them off with Contingency Plan and display a power on the earring, it can actually close out games rather nicely.
I would say it's very, very true that nobody expects Dishonor Phoenix. When I literally go
plan.
Yeah, exactly. When I literally go into Phoenix chat and somebody asks me about my deck list and I post my deck list and everybody goes, "You're splashing crab? What the heck is happening?" Like the Phoenix chat where everybody is playing Phoenix, then yeah, it's definitely not something that anybody is expecting to actually happen. Nobody even thinks of contingency plan as a card, but I like to think of it as a cycle. Some people try and claim that it doesn't cycle itself, but that's basically it. Is you're either using it to dishonor and get the win, or or you're drawing a bunch of cards because you no longer care, because you no longer are playing for the dishonor win. In which case, you can just draw 6 cards and cycle it out. So it's perfectly fine either way. And it doesn't really clog your hand too much because of the fact that you can cycle it in a worst case scenario where you're not dishonoring anyway.
If you're getting a free card with the library anyway, then having a card like contingency plan matters less. If you're a faction that has to bid for their cards, then contingency plan is probably a little bit worse than a cycle, right?
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Obviously, like, because you're getting a free card draw and you're like, wow, I could literally bid 1, knock this to 0, and then still get a card. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, and that's honestly what happens more often than not. Is I end up bidding. Once we get into the like turn 3 or 4, and I'm getting really close to the dishonor, you just contingency plan for 0. I probably have a library up, so I draw the same amount of cards as my opponent and take the honor.
Yeah, it's a nice closer, and Crab Splash is certainly one of the more interesting ones for Phoenix. And if more dishonor tech comes Phoenix's way, I expect it to be a fairly scary, like, real deck that can switch rather nicely. Speaking of interesting splashes, I actually think Unicorn is pretty underappreciated for Phoenix. With Unicorn, you can get Spyglass, which again is just another one of those cards that helps you get incremental advantage. More card draw, always good, and especially card draw that doesn't require honor. And then the Ayuchi Wayfinder helps you scout out your opponent's shameful display so you don't get wrecked by it, because Phoenix get wrecked by it more than anyone else. And it's also just another Shigenja, so you can plop it down when you have a Storm in hand and get yourself an extra stat. Actually, an extra 2 stats, really, because it boosts your Storm by 1 and it's a 1/1 in itself. Both those are a solid reason to splash Unicorn, in my opinion, right now. And Favored Mount is also nice, but...
And then, as we talked about earlier with the Imperial Cycle previews, like Talisman of the Sun is going to be a really interesting splash in Phoenix. Phoenix has some interesting splashes with Lion, with Guard Duty. If the Courtier type thing ends up being a thing, they might think about Disdainful Market. There's just, you've got some options in Phoenix, which is cool. I'm glad that Phoenix doesn't feel shoehorned into a single splash, and different things work well for them, because their core, right? The core of their Dynasty deck and the core of their Conflict deck still works very well together. And so other things can come in and supplement that.
Yeah. I will say, though, like right now, out of core, before anything comes out, even though I'm playing around with Crab, even though, some people are playing around with Unicorn, I still think Dragon is pretty much the definitive splash out of core. It's just, it works with the deck very well. It's very easy to see the synergy between the Dragon Splash and the Phoenix core deck. So I think in general, that's probably what you're going to be doing. Like I said, you can make some arguments for things like Crab. I still think I'm enjoying Crab. You can make some arguments for Unicorn. I could make a decent argument for Crane as well.
That's the one I was going to mention, actually.
Yeah, you can drag in things like Voice of Honor and things like that, which you can reasonably get off against things that aren't also Crane. But yeah, I think Dragon is pretty much the definitive splash if you want to just play straight Phoenix. If you just want to play Phoenix the way that it seems the best right now, I feel like that's probably the way to go.
I actually think for most clans, Dragon ends up being like the quote unquote safe splash, just because of the base like power level it gives you, both in terms of Tattooed Wanderer, any of the ancestral attachments, and Let Go. So if you're not sure what you want to splash, then you just be like, I'll just take stuff that's gonna just take good stuff. Take Dragon good stuff.
Yep, that's fair. And you guys mentioned the Crane Splash. Admit Defeat is quite solid. Voice of Honor is quite solid. Above Question is also seeing a lot of play to prevent targeted dishonor effects like Force Shame and Way of the Scorpion, and to a lesser extent court games. But it does stop court games if it's your only character participating. So again, it depends on the style you want to go for. If you want to keep your guys honored and go for a more honored style, Crane is definitely the better splash probably for that. I'm really partial to Dragon though because it really helps grinder house the game, and it's the least volatile of all the splashes in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
This is definitely true.
Yeah. Just solid.
It's definitely
it gives you
safe.
a solid baseline. It's just safe.
Yeah, it's safe. It's straightforward. You can't go wrong with Legos and Miramotos and Tattooed Wanderers. Like they'll never be bad.
Yep, and I think those are probably like the 4 really worthwhile splashes. Lion is also like every splash is good. Every splash has good cards you can pull in. It really is your thing. But I think those are probably the 4 I think I see most commonly done. And by most commonly, I mean like Dragon is like the most common by and large. Some people do Crane, and then like Unicorn and Crab are like really rare, but still sometimes.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say like from what I've seen, basically Dragon makes up like 85% plus of everything, and then there's like the very very occasional Crane or Unicorn, and I want to say that I'm the only person that's actually splashed Crab in Phoenix so far. I don't know if that's true, but I've never seen.
Just go for it.
I was like, I've never seen anybody else splash Crab in Phoenix. I really don't.
The one splash that I think would be kind of iffy would actually be Scorpion, simply because Phoenix doesn't like being dishonored, and Scorpion, the good Scorpion cards require you to dishonor your characters.
Yeah.
So, even though those cards are powerful, having to play around that downside would be kind of fighting an uphill battle. Even though Calling in Favors isn't a hilarious card, oh my gosh, just such a blowout.
Yeah.
But
yeah, there are a couple of cards that you can get out of it. That's not too bad. You can take Fiery Madness, which is perfectly fine as a card. You can. There are some cards in Phoenix that you can afford to Forged Edict as courtiers. The courtiers aren't usually as bad.
Yeah.
For the dishonor, like I don't really mind putting it on like a mediator as much if I'm playing a mediator, or even a diplomat like isn't as bad because they only have 1 glory apiece. But
well, and the other thing too, if you're just trying to leverage the straight glory value necessarily, then like for things like the Radiant Orator, it doesn't particularly matter if they're dishonored because you're still her ability still triggers off of the.
Yeah, it's the number of glory that you have, not their stats.
It's just you're knocking your stats down, which can be here or there.
Yeah. And Forged Edict, I think, is the main reason to go for Scorpion. The other stuff's kind of auxiliary to that. Yeah.
Forged Edict and Calling in Favors are great. I like both those cards a lot.
Calling in Favors, I think, is slightly worse for Phoenix than Forged Edict.
All right.
Yes.
Still playable.
Just against Dragon, it's just like such a blowout. It's like they put a thing on the N10 Adept and like you just steal it back, and like now not only did you steal their attachment, but the N10 Adept can't use their ability anyway. That happened like 4 times last time. My opponent was really upset.
All right, so I'm going to talk real quick now about matchups. As a Phoenix player, what decks should you be worried about, and what decks are you favored against? So at least according to the stats tables brought to us by... I believe it's Croy, Insanity Rises, and one other person. They started a Google form that will automatically input games into a spreadsheet and lay out all the statistics for those games. It's quite handy. And so I'm going to use that for like a baseline reference. So in the average case, Phoenix have a 51% win rate, kind of coming in above, like middle to above average. And it seems like their worst matchups are both Scorpion and Crane.
Oh my god, the Crane matchup though.
Crane matchup's pretty bad.
You just feel like you can't do anything. When they splash Scorpion, especially, and this is their 2 worst matchups, of course.
In the same deck.
Together in the same deck. Like, what the event cancels against Phoenix are so much better than against pretty much every other deck. Like, we rely on our events to do things. Display of Power is huge. Know the World is pretty good. Against the Waves is big. So the fact that your opponent has 6 event cancels in their deck Supernatural Storm that they can just kind of throw out whenever they need to against your big events is insane against Phoenix. Even against not Scorpion, Crane has some advantages because they still have Voice of Honor and they still have a lot of honor effects, and they still like are able to keep themselves honored, which is I find a small advantage for Phoenix is the fact that you can dishonor your opponents reasonably. But it ends up being really big. Like the vent cancels are probably the biggest reason that Crane is so good against Phoenix. You feel powerless a lot of times when you play against Crane and they just have all the event cancels in their hand. You just can't do anything.
Yep. Crane also just has a lot of high tempo, and that can really overrun Phoenix's early game board playing. If you start losing early, then it can be really hard to come back as Phoenix against Crane. They can kind of like lock you down. As for the Scorpion matchup, I personally feel it's closer to 50-50 than the stats imply, but it's very understandable why Scorpion would be a struggling matchup for Phoenix. Scorpion has a lot of removal, it has a lot of dishonor, and Phoenix's high glory values make both of those, high glory values and wanting to put fate on characters, make both of those very not fun. Scorpion also has event cancels, though it only has 3 in the Forged Edict, and those at a time of time can be just as bad as Crane. So I can understand that the two matchups where event cancels and high tempo and dishonor are the plays, that's where Phoenix tends to struggle. That said, though, Phoenix does appear to have, and I agree with most of this, a relatively good win rate against every other clan. Lots of versatility. I like to say Phoenix are able to do whatever you want them to do, so long as you play them right, and you work with what the deck gives you, and you play everything out and plan it out thoughtfully. So I think Phoenix potentially have like a very explosive high end, and particularly their win rate against Dragon is noteworthy. I imagine that's simply because Dragon has a lot of impactful Shugenja, like Yokuni, and the Swordsmith, and the Doom Shugenja, and that makes against the Waves just even better.
A side note too, I think part of the reason that you feel like the Scorpion matchup is a little bit better is just because of the way that Scorpion breaks down. So I feel like Phoenix has a better matchup against Dishonor Scorpion than it does against Tempo Scorpion, for the same reasons as you mentioned before, because of the way that Tempo works against Phoenix, because we want to grind out the game and want to slow things down. We really can't out-tempo Crane and Scorpion in any fashion at all. There's a reason that Crane is the worst matchup, and why they're pretty consistently going to be, I think. But I think Scorpion, it depends. If you're playing against Tempo Scorpion, I feel like the win rate is probably a little bit lower than if you're playing against Dishonor Scorpion, because we have at least a reasonable way to prevent the Dishonor from happening. And the Dishonor Scorpion deck is a bit slower, so we have the ability to actually get to our late game and build our board state a little bit better.
Yeah, the tempo aggressive Scorpion deck I think does well against Phoenix for the reasons you mentioned, Travis, and with the just removal and being able to grind your board state out or make your board state irrelevant and be able to execute their game plan. And then on top of that, you're having to deal with the fact that they're pretty much going to be bidding high, and they're going to have a fistful of cards to deal with, not only potential event cancels and Forged Edict, but be able to counter any of your buffs, or knock guys down with like Fiery Madness, or just pull guys out of nowhere with the Adept of Shadows and just different things like that.
Yeah, I actually kind of feel Tempo Scorpion's not a really terrible matchup for Phoenix, assuming you can ride the storm. Tempo Scorpion tends to have like a really explosive beginning, but then really falter, and like all you need is like a single bow effect to go through, or like to prevent breaks a couple of times, and then they run out of ability to actually break provinces because they're very limited on their stat boost for themselves. They rely mostly on decreasing your stats. So yeah, that's the main thing.
If they can break your board, like you have to end up playing like this semi-control situation where you're like, I just need to survive to this point. But it can be difficult to do that. I played like 3 Phoenix games last night and I blew them out. So
yeah, I was to say I would say like I said, I think it's reasonably like close to the middle for most matchups. I would say Crane with a Scorpion Splash is like the one matchup where you're probably like looking at an actually really bad win rate, like a 70-30 win rate at best. But yeah, Tempo Scorpion, I would say it's probably no more than like a 15 or to 20% change either way. I wouldn't say that, and I would say Dishonor Scorpion might be slightly favored against Phoenix, but probably not by too much either. So, yeah, I think it's largely dependent on the deck, and we're a reasonably good deck against most other decks as well. We have like slightly more trouble with Lion than some of the other ones, but like we still have a positive win rate against Lion, which is surprising given how good that deck seems to be in the meta right now. So I would say that we're in a good spot in general. I have yet to find a really consistent way to shore up the Crane matchup, but I think that that's the only major one that you have to worry about. And Scorpion can be won through really good play and just seeing the cards that you need.
Yep. And finally, for this deck tech, I want to talk about advice for playing against Phoenix. So Phoenix is sitting across the table. What do you have to look out for? How should you alter your play? And the first thing I want to say is display of power. Remember it always. If they have 2 Fate floating, or they have the potential to get 2 Fate, keep in mind that display of power could happen. And just be ready for it. Play around. Always think to yourself, if I play this ring and it gets display of powered, how much does it screw me? If it screws you over a lot, perhaps don't do it. Or make sure you have that event cancel ready.
That's pretty much the biggest one is pay attention to their events, pay attention to the rings, especially that they have influence over. I think the most important thing against Phoenix is picking what rings your conflicts are. So, you have display of power. You have to decide whether that ring is going to hurt you more than it's going to help you if it doesn't get display of powered. You have to decide whether running that Void Ring into an Atsuko is a good idea if you really need that Void Ring effect that badly. You have to decide whether you can deal without having your 2-cost guys in a Fire Ring conflict if they have a Masahiro up, or if you're willing to sacrifice one of them. I think that's one of the biggest things, and it's one of the only decks that really makes big use of it. Is you really, really have to think about ring effects. Every single conflict that you do matters because
Earth Rings for Solemn Scholars.
Yeah, Earth Rings for Solemn Scholars. If they have the Sukune on board, obviously the rings that are left over are really important. So you have to take consideration a lot of times between I have to go into a Masahiro and I might have to sack a character, but is it worth getting rid of the Fire Ring out of the pool so that they can't Sukune Fire Ring at the end of the turn? It's a lot, and I think that's the main stipulation that you have to look out for Phoenix is you have to pick the right rings in every conflict, and you have to constantly be aware of what rings are available, what rings they can influence, and what cards they could possibly use to change what rings are happening, to change what ring effects are going to go off during the turn. You also have to consider things like Know the World, where you can switch out rings, or both their Stronghold and Elemental Fury, or not Stronghold, but Kuroi Mori, which is probably under their Stronghold, and Elemental Fury, where they're going to switch ring effects. So it's a lot of playing around ring effects, basically. And that's the way that Phoenix gets a lot of their advantage anyway. So if you can stop them from getting ring effects throughout the game, if you can stop them from getting the ring effects that they need throughout the game, you generally win.
Okay. You mentioned the last one I thought of was Kuroi Mori itself.
Yeah.
Kuroi Mori is a big deal when you're up against Phoenix. You have to know how to handle it. I find that against the clans that generally pressure really, really heavily on breaking, I will put Kuroi Mori under my Stronghold. This includes Crane, this includes Lion, and it includes actually Crab, because Crab kind of has very few things to deal with it right now.
Right now, I'm basically putting it under my Stronghold for anything that isn't, even in Mirror, for anything that isn't Unicorn and Scorpion. And I even debate it on Scorpion sometimes. The only reason Dragon? I don't for Unicorn, I actually put it under my Stronghold for Dragon.
Oh, that's weird.
They have reasonably consistent stats across the board, but a lot of times they're slightly favored one way or the other.
Well, I think what ends up happening with Dragon is they end up with a hand of attachments that buff one thing, and they end up stacking them on one dude. And so then all of a sudden they're slightly unbalanced for some reason. I don't know.
They usually end up slightly balanced in one way or the other. And importantly, a Shameful Display doesn't tend to be a huge swing against Dragon. It usually helps you because you get your character honored, but it doesn't it tends not to affect their characters nearly as much unless it's exactly Yokuni. In which case, I haven't done with the world or against the waves, so I don't really care that much.
So back to Korimori and on the stronghold. You have to have some sort of plan for dealing with it. You need to be able to win either both sides, or you need a tech card such as Captive Audience for when they switch it to political to allow you to switch it back. Pathfinder's Blade is another tech card coming out that we know about now in the first cycle that will allow you to cancel the swap in the first place. But in the meantime, I think the best way to handle Korimori is to sit back when you know it's there. Sit back, build up your board to the point that you can break both sides. And that's your best way to deal with it. And then try not to lose in the process.
Secondarily, too, against matchups like Dragon and Unicorn and stuff where they have the ability to switch it or they just have fairly balanced stats, the ability to switch the ring matters a lot more for Phoenix, too. It's really, if you have an Atsuko sitting on board, making sure it's a void conflict can be really, really big. And a lot of times that has a lot more effect than Shameful Display as well. But generally, if Korimori isn't going into your stronghold, it's going to be Shameful Display.
I find it's usually Rally to the Cause if it's not Korimori. I will almost never put Korimori on my stronghold, or Shameful Display on my stronghold.
I don't run Rally, so I run Elemental Fury. And I don't like the fact that Rally only works once and does exactly what Korimori does. So
once is all I need sometimes. And same thing with Elemental Fury by that token.
But yeah, Korimori is, like I said, it single-handedly wins games a lot of times because, like, especially decks like Lion, I think is one of the biggest ones, has a huge problem getting through Korimori because they're all in on military more often than not. And when you can just say, yeah, every single conflict you go up against me is going to be political, they have a really hard time sometimes breaking through that.
Yeah, unless they're splashing Unicorn again for Captive Audience as a tech card.
Yeah, if they have Captive Audience as a tech card, but that's not super common.
Yeah, Lion seem to be favoring Dragon Splash right now. Who knew? Anyway.
Yeah, right. Like everybody else.
I think that's mostly it. Keep in mind the rings you're attacking. Keep in mind Display of Power, potential unbow effects or big stat boost from the Shugenja, and then Korimori are like the big things with Phoenix when you're playing against them. If you keep those in mind, you're going to have a much better chance winning that game. So let's go on to listener questions, and then we'll close out for the day. So we have 4 listener questions here. First one by Asako Twilight is, which cards do you think have the most divergent opinions and why? I assume he meant to say, which cards do we find we disagree on the most and why? And
I also think generally, like from a meta perspective, like what cards are...
Yeah, I think it's a little bit
some people
of both.
think are really good or really bad.
Yeah. I think Display of Power and Supernatural Storm are generally underrated. That's my opinion. I think Display of Power has gotten less so underrated now that a few games have been happening more and more. But I know for a while Supernatural Storm, a lot of people were not very whelmed by it.
Yeah, I think people are starting to warm up to both of those cards. And I think people are finally starting to realize that Display of Power is actually just a really good card. And there's never any reason to not play around it at this point because it can just ruin your day. Like getting a ring effect for doing nothing is pretty freaking big sometimes. And since that's where, again, most of Phoenix's advantage is from ring effects anyway, the fact that you can just do that and then ensure that you don't have to worry about the conflict regardless is pretty big.
Have you come back around on Savvy Politician yet, Gentry? Is it still garbage?
I don't know. I still don't like it that much, but
I'm trying to think of other cards that where we specifically had like super diverging opinions.
Unicorn in general, I think. We kind of overhyped Unicorn, or rather, maybe we didn't overhype, but like Unicorn on paper looked rather solid.
Yeah,
I think it's just problems with moving in not being as effective as you think it would be.
Yeah, I think that's the big. I don't know. It seems like I said, I actually stated this in one of our earlier podcasts when we were reviewing Unicorn. I remember distinctly stating that was going to be a deck that tops a lot of tournaments early on because it was going to be a deck that was going to be easy to pilot, like reasonably easy to pilot at a high level, and going to be strong enough to do it. And now that we've actually seen some unicorn play, half of that is still true. I still think it's one of the easier decks to pilot at a reasonable degree. I mean, obviously, it's still got a pretty high skill cap in general, but I think you can pilot it well enough to like top a smaller tournament reasonably easily. But I don't think it's actually good enough to do that by itself. I think the deck itself is bad enough that it doesn't that it would actually take a pretty absurd pilot to top with it at this point. It's very underwhelming.
Single core, definitely, like the single core results I think were expected considering they have so much cavalry synergy, but we were expecting like triple core to be a little bit more heavily favored towards anything that kind of aggroes, and unicorns seem to be like the most aggressive. Like they have all the movement effects, they have some good buffs, like ways to just cheat dudes in. Might have been able to play things like Fallen in Battle, and that just like you can move your dudes in, it just doesn't the way other things
aren't good enough.
Yeah, your dudes just aren't good enough. It's weird. I think Lion being at the supposed top of the meta, it was a little bit of a surprise based on how we felt early about the game, but obviously things have come out that kind of changed that, and then like our opinion or how you can play that deck has changed over time. And now they're very strong.
Crane as well. I think
we didn't
kind of came out of nowhere with the Scorpion Splash. But it came out of nowhere. Like it might have been obvious to some, but like playing Crane with and without Scorpion Splash to me feels like night and day. In terms of like a tempo game, I was doing Crane Dragon with tempo, but it felt super volatile and very like Glass House. But with Scorpion, I don't feel volatile at all. I feel super secure in everything I'm doing. So that's helped them a lot.
Just because we're on Phoenix today anyway, I'm still people are still telling me that Masahiro is good, and I'm still telling people that Masahiro is garbage, and I can't wait to get rid of it.
It's not that Masahiro is good; it's that he's not bad.
Yeah, no, I don't believe that at all.
He's like,
that's just a me thing, but I think Masahiro's hot garbage, and I can't wait to get it out of my deck.
I guess I don't think he's hot garbage. I just think he's significantly less impactful than when we first saw that card. Everyone saw that card like, oh my gosh, you get to kill a guy, and then you realize like, oh my god, I have to bow this guy to kill a guy. Like, how do I get more value?
And assassination. He competes with assassinations. Really, if assassination didn't exist, his effect would be a lot more like meaningful, probably.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like I just don't get value out of him almost ever. He's just kind of there as a body.
He's a 3/2 Shugenja. That's his job.
He's a 3/2 Shugenja that costs too much. That's basically all he is.
Some other ones. This kind of feeds into the next question. So it's like Asako Twilight also asked, Dragon were initially pegged near the top, and reality hasn't supported that. Given the dip in attachment hate, since people started moving away from 2-cost attachments, does Winter Court project that cycle to be high or low on attachment hate at Worlds? So kind of following up similar things that kind of had divergence of opinions. I think we thought Dragon, we were like, oh my gosh, Dragon seems insane. Like they're top of the thing. But they've kind of settled out to where the other 6 are sort of, with obviously like we just talked about Crane and Lion being maybe a little bit higher up on the list. So why do you think that is necessarily? Is just sort of like the Dragon Dynasty deck isn't as strong as initially thought, or
their Dynasty deck has a few weak characters in it, and the Dragon game plan ultimately is very effective but very simple. It's very straightforward. Your opponent can easily tell what you're going to be doing, right? You're going to be attacking both conflicts. You're going to be putting attachments on dudes. They can generally expect about how many stats you're throwing at them and play around it. And I think like with skilled play, you can play around that quite nicely and still come out ahead of the Dragon player. So Dragon, like again, it's very effective but very simple. And by being very simple, you become a bit predictable. And therefore, it's hard to do things that throw your opponent through a loop or surprise your opponent.
I also think some of their better characters, so like the Niten Adept, which we talked about, is great because it's a bow effect. They're susceptible to assassinate. So if some of your better characters are cheaper, the fact that your opponent can just wipe them off the board by paying 3 honor is kind of it's kind of a big deal.
The Newton Adept specifically is like one of the best cards in Dragon, and with Assassination being as big as it is in the meta, that actually has a huge effect on the deck. I also find that because they're as balanced as they are, because they actually have, they're not particularly good in anything. They're just kind of okay at everything. I think that they just kind of fall behind in most games. Like, Lion out militaries them, Crane out politicals them, and has the event cancels. Phoenix plays with the rings better than they do. Scorpion chokes better than they do. Even Unicorn like out tempos them.
I don't think Unicorn out tempos Dragon at all.
I don't know.
Dragon are like a quintessential tempo deck. They get a lot of stats on the board, and then they try to win very quickly. That's pretty much their game plan right now. But going back to Twilight's question here, I think it's a really interesting one. He's basically calling out the metagame and the nature of metagame as a whole. So like right now, and like even before, Dragon we kind of predicted to be a popular splash for Let Go, and that hurts 2-cost attachments. So people will stop running 2-cost attachments, and that in turn hurts the value of Let Go. So what Twilight's asking here is if we think that attachment hate will be very high, very prominent at Worlds, or will people be not running it because 2-cost attachments are currently kind of finding their way out of decks. And my prediction is that attachment hate will still be very strong at Worlds, and we will see a lot of Dragon Splash and a lot of Let Go played at Worlds. I don't think the attachment hate's going to tone down anytime soon, despite that lower value targets are being played.
Yeah, I definitely think you're correct, because like I've actually dropped down to 2 Let Go in my Phoenix deck in favor of another Tattooed Wanderer recently, but like even the 2 Let Go, I find that even when my opponents stopped playing all of the high cost attachments that they used to play, I'm playing against Lion and they're not playing Sashimono as much or anything like that, I still get value out of it. Like even if I'm just hitting a Katana, even if all I'm doing is hitting a Katana just to win the conflict, I'm still getting value out of that Let Go. I'm still hitting a 0-cost attachment for a 0-cost card and getting advantage out of it. So
you're not losing fate advantage, and you're equal on card advantage. So it ends up being kind of a null, a null trade.
And like there's some matchups too where it's like it's almost just necessary. Like when in the Phoenix mirror, Let Go is huge. If you're playing against Phoenix at all, Let Go is huge because you need to be able to get rid of Cloud the Minds on important characters. If you play out your clan champion with 3 fate on it, and then it gets Cloud the Minded, like. There's some factions that just can't handle that. That just like you just wasted 7-8 fate on a character that's not going to do anything anymore because you don't have Let Go to get rid of the Cloud the Mind. So I think it's still going to be prevalent. I think it's still necessary in a lot of decks to play Let Go because it just does a lot for your deck. And like it will always get value. There's no way you won't get value out of Let Go, even if it's an even trade.
Yeah, there's no decks that aren't running any attachments, and quite a few decks running attachments worth Let Going. So I do think that we'll still see play. I think Calling in Favors might not be as popular, but we'll have to see.
I think Calling in Favors might be one that people start dropping as people start playing less attachments. Yep. But even that card, given what it does, is still fine even if you hit like a Katana or a Fan.
Well, in Scorpion, you're going to run it, right? Because you don't care.
Well, yes.
I mean, you might as well. You don't have to splash for it.
Yeah, you don't have to splash.
I don't think you'll splash for it. Yeah, I don't think anybody will be splashing for Calling.
I think Crane will. I think Crane will do 2/2/2 with Fiery Madness, Forged Edict, and Calling in Favors. I think that's a typical Crane splash going into Worlds. Yeah, they're keepers.
Oh no,
they're keepers. They have the ability to do that. That's fine.
Yeah.
Keepers are there.
So Joe from Cincinnati asks us, what clan is best at dual pressuring breaks and honor dishonor? And
guess who just said that? Guess who just brought this up earlier?
I do think that even though Phoenix can do it quite well,
I think
second or third, I think Scorpion is definitely the best at dual pressuring breaks and dishonor. Because Scorpion pretty much always has a dishonor switch whenever they want. When you and the Scorpion player are both down at 5 honor, they can just bid 1, and you have to respect. While you're thinking about still respecting things like I can swim, they can just bid 1 and take honor from you, and then start bleeding you from there. Once you're down to about 5 honor, that I usually find most Scorpion players will switch to bidding 1 that turn to try and drain honor from you, and then 2 every turn afterwards to keep you low and still get cards for themselves. And then slowly bleed you dry with the Stronghold and other dishonor effects.
And I think they can also, you can also pressure breaking provinces simultaneously.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a big deal.
Yeah. Scorpion don't have like a lot of ways to get extra reach to break provinces, but politically, they're probably going to break a province every turn.
Right.
So that does help them a lot. Crab is also worth mentioning. Crab's pretty good, and I mentioned Joe understands asking this question. Probably was hoping we'd say Crab.
I'm pretty sure.
I think Crab's a great honorable mention and probably the second best at dual pressuring honor or dishonor and a province win. Honor is not really a pressure mechanic yet. There's just not enough ways to gain honor to really make it a pressure mechanic. So honoring out is not really putting pressure on your opponent so much as it is you gimping yourself.
You not drawing cards.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
And finally, Roger Ashton Winter asks, Imperial Favor, vitally important mechanic or annoying boost for the player who is already ahead? Well, Roger, I think we just got the answer to that question today with the new Crane 5-cost character showing that the Imperial Favor might have some extra uses coming in the cycle, being discarded for extra powerful effects. And oh boy, is drawing 3 cards and then reducing the cost of all your events by 2 pretty powerful. So I would say the Imperial Favor is looking like it's going to be a very important mechanic that you're going to have to play around more in the future instead of just being a slight bonus.
And the other thing too is he mentions like it just being for the player that's ahead. That's not necessarily the case. Although you get rings and things, it's reasonably easy if you actually need the favor for something to just leave a character standing with a couple of glory and claim it.
Yep.
It happes I've done it in Phoenix a decent amount because we have high glory characters. It's a little bit harder in things like Crab and Dragon where your glory count isn't quite as high, but I find it's not too hard if you really need the favor, and the favor can be a decent boost in the following turns. That 1 extra stat actually makes a pretty big difference sometimes.
Giving up like a potential conflict to grab the favor, especially with some of the things that we've seen, or the one thing that we've seen and we anticipate coming down the line that might work with the favor, is going to be super viable going forward. And it's this type of interaction we saw with Yoshi. Is that his last name?
Yeah, Kakita Yoshi.
Yoshi is exactly what I wanted to see from a card going forward. So I think in one of the other podcasts we mentioned, like, what are things that we kind of want to see the game develop into, or what does the game need to have? And I think it's more interactions with the Imperial Favor. Check. We're going to get some of that. More dueling based mechanics or things that work off of the honor dial are the 2 big things that I want to see a lot more. Oh, and then making honor win super viable. Those are the 3 things that I want to see more going forward, and we're already seeing the Imperial Favor thing. So
yep. Hey, good job, FFG. You're doing good work, and I look forward to seeing what else is in this cycle. And I only have to wait 3 weeks to do so. So hey, all right. So thank you guys for asking those questions. I think we're going to probably do more listener questions in the future. So if you have any, you can feel free to send it to us at wintercourtpodcast@gmail.com. Or you can feel free to contact me, Dan, or Alex through the usual streams. I want to plug that stat sheet real quick again. That stat sheet by Croy and Insanity Rises and Moused. That's very helpful, and we're trying to get as many people to submit game reports as they can. 3-core only, please, and try not to double report. But more information generally helps keep us an idea of how the game's looking overall. And right now it does look fairly balanced. Even Unicorn has a 42% win rate, which is not that bad compared to other card games where certain bad factions or bad decks would have like sub 10% win rates. So I think a large deal of
3-core
this
balance has been good.
Is in the hands of the pilot, and the general balance seems relatively on point. And if you want to find that, you can join the L5R Discord and type in !stats into the Discord, and a bot will link you to it. Or you can simply follow the link. I'll put a link in the description for this episode that you can use to find that sheet. And any contribution there would be awesome. So once more, I want to thank you guys for listening to another lengthy episode of the Winter Court Podcast. Although this time it wasn't our fault, we swear. Fantasy Flight gave us extra content, and we felt we needed to talk about it. So once more, I am Travis McDaniel, and you can find me on the Discord under I Fight Dragons, on the Reddit under I Fight Dragons, or pretty much anywhere under I Fight Dragons or Travis Fights Dragons. Also, if you want to watch some games, I do stream from time to time, either commentary for the Discord League or my own games. You can follow me on twitch.tv/Travis Fights Dragons.
I am Alex Gentry. You can find me under Dark Destroy pretty much everywhere as well. I've been frequenting the Discord a lot more recently, so you can usually just ping me and I'll show up if I'm relevant. If I'm relevant to a conversation.
Yeah, and then I'm Dan Henley, also known as Dan War, on both Reddit and the Discord and various other places on the internet. I'm also a moderator on r/L5R, so if you have any problems over there, any questions over there, feel free to send me a mod mail or just send me any kind of message on the Discord. I'd love to answer your question. So.
All right, man. And the game is officially out now, so now when I say go out there and play some L5R, I mean literally go out there and play some L5R. The game's out, play it a lot, and have fun. See you guys next time.